Chapter 1577. Bufong opened his eyes. What came into view was Sol 13's ferocious face. His silver face was glowing coldly, and he looked a little fierce. He was very confident that he should be able to defeat this chef. After all, he had gone through all kinds of hardships to become a Sol overlord in this chaotic universe. He did not think that anyone could defeat him. As long as the heaven gods of this world did not appear, he was invincible. No one could stop him, not even the divine emperor, and not even the chef in front of him. He was an existence destined to climb to the peak. Have you recovered from your anorexia? How dare you open your mouth in front of me? Bufong said lightly. His words were neither salty nor bland. There was no righteous indignation, nor was there any raging anger. It was so calm that it was as if he was enjoying the shade and had asked in a friendly manner if he had eaten. However, his words seemed to have touched Sol 13's sore spot. His scarlet eyes constricted. You're courting death. The next moment, without hesitation, the black hole in his mouth came crashing down, intending to devour Bufong completely. The surrounding people let out cries of surprise. Sol 13's strength was obvious to all. Even a divine emperor was no match for him. How could Bufong resist him? Bufong was hailed as the hope of mankind, but now it seemed that this hope was about to be snuffed out. What should I do? The eyes of the weak divine emperor, who was leaning against the door, flashed with reluctance. He had tried his best to protect Bufong so that Bufong could break through, but now it seemed that it was still not enough. The Shai divine dynasty probably can't hold on any longer. Even the chaotic universe can't hold on any longer. Rumble. A tremendous amount of energy swept out of Sol 13's mouth, which looked like a black hole of the cycle of reincarnation. It stretched as far as the eye could see, and it was extremely gruesome. Bufong slowly raised his head, frowning as he stared at the black hole. In his eyes, Sol 13 was just opening his mouth. His hand shook. Bufong focused his eyes, and an oyster pancake appeared in his hand. Steam swirled around it, and waves of heat rolled out. With a jerk of his hand, Bufong stuffed it into Sol 13's mouth. Even though Sol 13 had become a Sol overlord, he was still a Sol demon. To him, human food was still disgusting. However, Sol 13 did not dodge the oyster pancake thrown by Bufong this time. As a gluttony Sol overlord, why would I be afraid of your food? No matter how disgusting it was still food. Gluttony, devour everything in the world. As soon as the oyster pancake entered Sol 13's mouth, it disappeared and was swept up by the energy. Sol 13's mind was as firm as a rock as he sneered. He continued to press forward. Voila! Bufong stood up from his seat and took a step back. Obviously, Bufong did not expect that the oyster pancake, which had always been successful, would fail to repel Sol 13. Of course, Bufong would not allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. Therefore, he left his position. Bufong pulled out the ladle hanging at his waist and smashed it at Sol 13's head. Bam! The Chilean transmigration ladle was a complete god of cooking set. It could even destroy a heaven god's attack. It was different from the other incomplete god of cooking sets. The ladle hit Sol 13 squarely on the head. Sol 13 thought he could block it, but who would have thought that Bufong would pull out a ladle and smash it at him? How dare you take out a mere ladle in front of me? Sol 13 growled. However, the Chilean transmigration ladle smashed down. Sol 13's roar came to an abrupt halt. The ladle landed lightly on his head and knocked him unconscious. A crisp sound rang out. A crisp sound rang out, causing Sol 13's hair to stand on end. He could not believe it. He took a few steps back, raised his hand, and touched his forehead. There, his silver insect scales were cracked. He could not believe that the chef in front of him had smashed his scales with a ladle. How was that possible? His defense was so strong that even a god emperor might not be able to hurt him at all. However, this chef managed to break it with just one knock. Buzz, however, the broken insect's scales quickly recovered. Sol 13 was now a Sol overlord, so his recovery ability was extraordinary. Unless he was crushed to a pulp, there would be nothing left of him. Otherwise, he would not have died. He would not have died in this life. Bufong toyed with the ladle in his hand. Boom! Suddenly, Bufong's aura changed, and his eyes grew serious. He grabbed the ladle with one hand. Holding it with one hand, he swung it upward and smashed it hard on Soul 13's chin. With a loud bang, Soul 13 was sent flying backward, the insect scales on his body shattering again and again. The surrounding people were stunned. Whether they were soul demons or humans, their eyes widened as they stared at Bufong, who had knocked out a heaven god soul overlord with a ladle. They were somewhat dumbfounded. This demigod is really heaven-defying. Can't even a soul overlord deal with him? Soul 13 got up from the ground. He was a little shocked, but now he had calmed down. He knew that Bufong was a little different. He took a deep breath. In the soul demon universe, when humans were in a desperate situation, peerless geniuses would also be born who wanted to fight for the rise of mankind. Such geniuses were very terrible. According to the records of the soul demons, such humans were geniuses who could not be judged by common sense. However, so what if they were such geniuses? In the past, the peerless genius of the soul demon universe, who was about to lead mankind to a turnaround, was killed by the soul god with a slap. Even now, his soul was still imprisoned by the soul god and suffering inhuman torture. Troubled times produce heroes. Perhaps the chef in front of him was a hero in the troubled world of soul demons. Soul 13 calmed himself down. He wanted to treat Bufong as normal. Bufong toyed with the ladle. In his mind, he was recalling what he had seen and what had happened. He was about to become a god, but no god, not even a heaven god, was willing to guide him. It was the biggest joke in the world. Bufong had a headache at first, but in the end he gave up. Since there were no gods to guide him, he chose to become a heaven illuminator. Then, he broke through the shackles and became a god. In his mind, the system's serious voice kept ringing out. In Bufong's mind, there was a buzzing sound like bees collecting honey. Congratulations to the host for successfully breaking through. You have received the promotion reward. The reward will now be distributed. The reward has been successfully distributed. The energy in the host's body has begun to convert. The true energy is being converted into divine power. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the opportunity to become a god. Will the host choose to take the test? The number of tests the system had received in its entire life might not be as many as this one. Bufong was a little confused. After a careful analysis, Bufong answered them one by one. The test to become a god. Accept. Buzz. With a thought, Bufong called up the system panel. At this moment, the panel had undergone a shocking change. Host, Bufong True Energy Cultivation Base, God Realm Cooking Talent, 10 star skills, Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique, 100 out of 100, Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100, Level 1 Knife Technique, Overlord 13 Blades, 1313, Gourmet Formation, 5/6, Cutting Immortal Style, 3/3, Tools, Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, Tools Spirit Hibernating, Black Turtle Constellation Walk, Tools Spirit Hibernating, Vermilion Chef Robe, Tools Spirit Hibernating, White Tiger Heaven Stove, Tool, Spirit Hibernating, Chilean Transmigration Ladle, God of Cooking Overall Rating, Heaven Divine Chef, please continue to work hard, System Level, Level 5, you and I will walk on the path to becoming the god of cooking. System reward. The right to teleport to the land where the artifact spirit slumbers. Divine ability. God of cooking's eye. Bufong looked at the system panel carefully. At this moment, the system panel had undergone a huge change. Without a doubt, Bufong had successfully broken through from a demigod to a god. It was possible to illuminate the heavens. Although no deity had chosen to receive him, Bufong had relied on himself to forge a path for himself. A look of anger appeared on Soul 13's cold face. This chef is actually in a daze while fighting me. Is he looking down on me, Soul 13? Or is he looking down on a soul overlord? A soul overlord is equivalent to a heaven god. Does he really think a heaven god is a pushover? Soul 13 focused his eyes. Then, his aura became more and more terrifying. Standing where he was, pitch-black demonic energy kept spreading out of the restaurant as if to envelop heaven and earth. All the people who sensed this terrifying aura felt their bodies become extremely heavy. This was the pressure that belonged to a heaven god. It was just like when the divine emperor broke through the heaven god tribulation and Bu Fong struck out with the heaven god's palm. The oppressive aura made everyone tremble. Even the shy divine emperor's eyes were filled with despair. This aura was not weaker than the heaven god's aura. There was no doubt that Soul 13 was now comparable to a heaven god. How could they fight him? If they were in the ancient times, when heaven gods roamed freely, they might not be afraid. But now, the heaven gods had disappeared, and if the present heaven god did not make a move, they would not be able to hold on. Boom! Boom! Soul 13 wanted to blast the restaurant to pieces with his aura. However, no matter how strong his aura was, he could not crush the restaurant. Instead, the surrounding houses exploded one by one. Bu Fong was also awakened by this aura. He jerked his head up and looked at Soul 13, who was floating in midair. Soul 13 flew out of the restaurant and hovered in midair as if he had devoured all the light between heaven and earth. Chef, I don't want to waste any more time with you. You can die now. All of you can die now. Soul 13's eyes burst into a ferocious light. He chose to kill everything. As for keeping humans in captivity, there would always be some left in other small worlds. He could just keep them in captivity when the time came. Bam! Bam! Soul 13 hovered in midair. At this moment, he no longer concealed his aura as a soul overlord. The ground cracked, and one tall building after another was blown to pieces. The entire capital of the Xiai divine dynasty changed in an instant. However, only the Luo family skyscraper stood firm. Soul 13's jaw dropped. Behind him, there seemed to be a terrible beast crawling out of the darkness. Like a Taotai, the beast was going to devour everything in the world. The gluttony demon lord was a disaster for heaven and earth. Rumble. The ground exploded. 1, 2, 3. They were demonic dragons condensed of dark energy. They soared into the sky, swaying in midair and completely enveloping the capital of the Xiai divine dynasty. Their bodies were level with the skyscraper, and they stared coldly at it. The restaurant on the top floor of the skyscraper was extremely small. Even the door was not as big as the eyes of the black dragons. The black dragons stared at the restaurant. At this moment, the entire restaurant seemed to become transparent. Bu Fong breathed a sigh of relief. Gusts of wind were blowing nonstop. Bu Fong's head was much clearer now. Soul 13's pressure made him feel tremendous pressure. Fortunately, I made a breakthrough. Bu Fong thought to himself. If it were in the past, he would have been killed by Soul 13 in an instant. After all, Bu Fong was nearly killed when he faced a heaven god. However, things are different now. The current Bu Fong was no longer the Bu Fong of the past. Tap, tap, tap. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. It slashed through the air with a ripping sound. The silver insect scales that bound Xiaobai, and you were cut off. Xiaobai, and you were free. They followed behind Bu Fong and walked out of the restaurant step by step with Bu Fong. The top floor of the skyscraper was already a mess. The wind was howling. Bu Fong walked out, his vermilion robe flapping noisily. After losing its artifact spirit, the vermilion robe's invincibility had disappeared. However, even with its invincibility, it was ineffective against existences at the soul overlord level. Bu Fong exhaled. He clasped his hands behind his back and raised his head. In the sky, Soul 13 stood proudly like a peerless fiend god. His forehead glowed as he stared at Bu Fong. Their gazes collided. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly. His mind flickered. When one became a god, he would comprehend his own divine ability. Generally speaking, divine abilities were derived from the power of laws. However, since Bu Fong had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe, what was his divine ability? The god of cooking's eye. This was the system's reward, as well as his divine ability. In that case, he might as well give it a try. Bufong raised his hand and rubbed his eyes. The god of cooking's eye was activated. Chapter 1578. The god of cooking's eye. Anything related to the god of cooking was certainly not an ordinary item. Bufong knew this very well. It was just like the god of cooking set and the god of cooking's menu. They were all very awesome. The divine ability he had awakened this time was the god of cooking's eye, which sounded invincible. Perhaps it was the kind of terrible ability that could impregnate anyone he looked at. That would be interesting. A terrible aura was clamoring. The humans had already fallen into complete despair. The gluttony soul overlord was equivalent to a heaven god. The aura and pressure of a heaven god enveloped the whole world, making everyone feel a sense of despair. Despair began to spread from the bottom of their hearts. Resist? How could they resist a heaven god? There were only 5 heaven gods in the whole chaotic universe, and no one knew where they had died. Even if the universe was destroyed, they might not show up. A heaven god was just a trap. The divine emperor closed his eyes in despair. He thought he was very close to the level of a heaven god, but when he sensed Soul 13's aura, he finally understood. He was still far from that level. Soul 13 was just toying with him. If Soul 13 really wanted to kill him, he would have been dead by now. Perhaps this was the fate of mankind. When the soul demons appeared, it was all destined. The ancient heaven gods disappeared, and the current heaven gods did not appear. Perhaps it was all destined a long time ago. Soul 13 sneered as he unleashed his aura unscrupulously. 3 huge divine dragons made of black smoke exuded an extremely terrible aura. The 3 black dragons were summoned by Soul 13, and each of them exuded the aura of a god emperor. How could they fight them? Soul 13 alone was enough to make them despair. Now, there were 3 more god emperor level existences. This was simply a nightmare for all of them. Bufong stood on the top of the building. The vermilion robe was fluttering. The 3 divine dragons opened their mouths and swooped down toward Bufong, trying to swallow Bufong to death. You focused her eyes, and Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. The black dragon's attack worried them as well. The god of cooking's eye. Suddenly, a voice that seemed to be slightly indifferent resounded. After that, the world seemed to have become quiet. Soul 13 hovered in the sky, smiling coldly. He crossed his arms over his chest, as if everything was under his control. This time, the last divine dynasty of the human race would be destroyed, and the humans in this chaotic universe would have nothing to rely on. Then, he would be able to completely control this world and keep the humans in captivity. No one could stop him. Soul 13 grinned. His teeth were also silver. Boom, boom, boom. Underneath, under his control, the 3 black gas divine dragons swooped toward the building. In an instant, they covered the entire building. Black gas swirled around the building. Without a doubt, even if this building was impregnable, it would soon be completely destroyed by the black dragon's attack. Kacha Kacha, the Luo family skyscraper, was the commercial center of the Xiai divine dynasty's capital. However, with the sweeping of the black gas, the surface of the building continued to crack, and the exterior became very dilapidated. However, to everyone's surprise, the building stood as firm as a rock. It did not move at all, as if it would not be destroyed no matter what. It was very strong and magical. The members of the Luo family were a little dumbfounded. When did their property become so sturdy? In the sky, all the soul demons burst out laughing. They looked at the humans crawling on the ground, and each of them revealed an excited smile. They were about to follow in the footsteps of the gluttony soul, overlord, and control a part of the universe. They, the soul demons, were going to become the masters of this universe. Suddenly, every soul demon was taken aback. Even Soul 13, who had been full of confidence, frowned and looked down at the building. The Luo family skyscraper was surrounded by the black dragon. However, the next moment, the black dragon's body exploded. With a loud bang, it was as if there was some kind of resplendent light shooting out at this moment, causing the black dragon chi to dissipate like melting snow. Soul 13 was shocked when he sensed the disappearance of the black dragon aura. How was this possible? On the top of the skyscraper, Bufong stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, his face indifferent. His hair was waving in the wind, and the velvet rope that tied it up had long been broken. However, his expression did not change in the slightest. He widened his eyes, and they shone with an extremely dazzling brilliance. A dazzling light burst out of them, and, as Bufong blinked, the light flickered. The god of cooking's eye. This was the god of cooking's eye. It could see through all falsehoods, and it could see through the weaknesses of all things. Yes, the weaknesses, or rather, the entry point, as the cutting point of an ingredient, how to cut it so that an ingredient could be cut perfectly. Buzz, Soul 13, looked at Bufong on the top of the skyscraper in Bufong's eyes, and he frowned. This chef has come out to cause trouble again. What's wrong with that look in his eyes? Rumble. Soul 13 focused his eyes. Then he raised his hand and turned it over. Black energy floated and spread in his palm. It was the power of sin that belonged to him. With a jerk, he pulled his palm up from the bottom. Immediately, the ground shattered, and the 3 divine dragons rushed up from the ground. Kill this chef for me, Soul 13 said coldly as he controlled the divine dragon. On the top of the skyscraper, Bufong stared at the 3 divine dragons with wide eyes. Dazzling and dazzling light spread in all directions. It was as if a pair of eyes had opened from the depths of chaos, directly seeing through all falsehoods. Before the 3 divine dragons could get close to Bufong, they melted like snow. The soul demons were all stunned. Bufong rubbed his sore eyes. Killing with a glare was exciting, but it was tiring to use. He raised his eyes and looked at Soul 13. Soul 13 was not qualified to be an ingredient, but for the god of cooking, everything in the world could be an ingredient. Even a stone could be used to make delicious soup. As the god of cooking, he must have this kind of confidence. Therefore, when he regarded Soul 13 as an ingredient, in Bufong's god of cooking's eye, 3 red dots appeared on Soul 13's body. Yes, 3 red dots, which meant that he was the entry point of an ingredient. Under normal circumstances, this was Soul 13's weakness. One was in his eyes. Another was in his armpits. The last one was under his thighs in an indescribable position. It was a little deep. The 3 weak points were all in strange locations. As a heaven god level soul overlord, Bufong actually saw 3 of his weaknesses. This Soul 13 was indeed somewhat unqualified. However, even with these 3 weaknesses, Bufong felt that he might not be able to kill him. The divine dragons condensed from the power of sin can't deal with you. Soul 13 narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he moved. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. In that case, I, the Soul Overlord, will personally grant you death, Soul 13 said. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure seemed to have teleported, leaving a series of afterimages in the void. Each afterimage was like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he was closing in on Bufong. In the sky, the soul demons roared once again. They did not stay idle. Instead, each of them unleashed a shocking aura of soul demons and rushed toward the humans on the ground. The humans had long been stimulated by the soul overlords, and they no longer had their previous fighting strength. Now, these humans were like pigs waiting to be slaughtered. Kill them, the soul demons roared. In the sky, countless soul demons approached in an instant. The bone warships whistled. Huge, ancient beasts of soul demons stepped through the void and approached. Boom! Boom! The soul demons were the first to attack. In the human camp, the powerhouses were terrified. The soul demons were invincible. Roar! A furious roar rang out. A naked expert swooped down from the sky like a savage beast and rushed into the battlefield in a flash. Kill them. Kill these filthy and disgusting soul demons. The Titan Crown Prince's eyes were red, and the barbaric glyphs on his body began to tremble. Like a mad beast, he rushed into the crowd of soul demons and began to slaughter them. He threw out punch after punch, killing the soul demons. His blood had been stirred up. Countless soul demons roared and swarmed toward him. The Titan Crown Prince's eyes were full of hatred. With a flip of his hand, he threw out a large wok of stinky tofu. As Bufang's apprentice chef, he had ordered a lot of stinky tofu. Boom! One stinky tofu after another exploded like fireworks. It was as if a smoke bomb had exploded in the air. The stench of stinky tofu almost turned black, spreading in all directions with the Crown Prince as the center. Come on, damn soul demons. Eat. Eat as much as you want. Blarg, the Titan Crown Prince hissed and growled. At this moment, he seemed to see the Titan Divine Emperor's kind smile and many acquaintances of the Titan Divine dynasty waving at him. Of course, in the end, it still turned into the pungent stench that rushed into his nostrils. He could not help but throw up in midair. He had injured 1,000 enemies, but he had lost 800 men. The stinky tofu exploded, turned into streams of light, and shot out in all directions. The soul demons madly chased after the stinky tofu. While the soul demons were enjoying the stinky tofu, their fleshly bodies were set ablaze and turned into ashes. The human camp's spirits rose. It turned out that they were not powerless to resist. Then, with bowls of stinky tofu in their hands, they rushed toward the soul demons crazily. Soul 13 appeared in front of Bufang, leaving numerous silver afterimages in his wake. Bufang felt a terrible aura coming at him. It was extremely terrifying, just like the palm the heaven god had thrown at him. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. He focused his eyes. With a thought in his mind, the power of law exploded out in an instant. Buzz, 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 5 consecutive discs of law quietly climbed up from behind Bufang. Streams of power of law poured into Bufang's body, making Bufang feel that his aura was rising steadily. Currently, he had just stepped into the god realm. However, he fearlessly threw a punch at Soul 13's incoming attack. Bam! The punch, which contained the power of 5 laws, wrapped around Bufang's Taotai arm, making Bufang feel as if he could punch a hole in the sky. At this moment, Bufang's heart even swelled a little. His punch contained the power of 5 laws, which made his arm colorful. Let's call it the Fist of the Extreme Path. The ultimate law. Bam! The 2 fists collided in midair without any fancy moves. The void instantly exploded. The entire sky was densely packed with cracks, and a myriad of turbulence surged out. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor's eyes widened as his heart trembled. Yu and Xiao Bai had already been pushed back into the restaurant by the tremendous pressure. There was no fancy move at all. Boom! Blasts of air surged as a figure kept retreating. Tap, tap, tap. Everyone's eyes widened. They saw Bufang stagger like a drunken man and finally sit down on the stone steps in front of the restaurant. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor's eyes darkened. Sure enough, I still can't do it? I thought Bufang could perform a miracle, but now it seems that he is still no match for Soul 13. After all, a soul overlord is equivalent to a heaven god. It's normal that he is no match for Bufang. Soul 13 remained motionless, the wings on his back flapping. He narrowed his eyes and looked at his fist. The silver insect scales covering his fist cracked and fell off slowly. A punch that contains the power of 5 laws is really powerful, he thought to himself. He felt the aura of a peerless genius in Bufang. It was just like the peerless genius who wanted to lead mankind to overthrow the soul demon's rule in the soul demon universe. However, he, Soul 13, would not repeat the same mistake. Soul 13's eyes lit up. His forehead glowed brightly. In the distance, Bufang rolled to his feet, rubbed his wrist, and breathed a sigh of relief. Focusing his eyes, he snapped his fingers. Crackle! A silver flame quietly bloomed in front of him. As Bufang became a god, it was time for the perfected divine flame to show its brilliance. Chapter 1579. The silver flame swayed its body, like a woman with a hot body, stroking her hair coquettishly. Bufang's eyes were fixed on the divine flame in front of him. Raise fire for 1,000 days. Use fire for a moment. Xiaohua, it's time to show your true skills. In the demigod realm, Bufang had spent a lot of effort to cultivate the divine flame, which had fused with 3,000 laws and reached perfection. Moreover, this perfection was different from the perfected laws of ordinary god emperors. It was derived from the laws of the fallen heaven gods. They were the essence, not the dregs. The stronger one was, the purer the power of the laws would be. This was the consensus of everyone. For example, when the laws comprehended by a demigod were compared with those comprehended by a heaven god, the heaven god's laws were naturally purer. This was due to the difference in levels. Soul 13 stood in the distance, hovering in front of the skyscraper. His eyes were scarlet, and his forehead was glowing faintly. He looked at his fist in disbelief. The insect scales on his fist had shattered into pieces and were falling off bit by bit. Bufang's strength was not that of a heaven god, and Soul 13 could easily sense that. For a soul overlord, he could crush all existences below the soul overlord realm. However, he was defeated by a human. For soul demons, levels meant everything. He was a soul overlord, so all existences below the soul overlord realm must submit to him. The strict hierarchy kept the soul demons in good order. To soul overlords, the soul god was their master, the supreme god. If soul god wanted them to die, they had to die. But humans were different. There were always strange and eccentric people among humans. Whether it was in the past or now, there were always people who broke the rules. Their levels were not high, but they could challenge authority. There was a saying among soul demons: when you meet such eccentric humans, don't hold back and kill them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the soul demons might be killed in the future. Rumble, the insect scales on his hand, were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, they were completely healed, and he was unscathed. As a soul overlord, his healing ability was far greater than before. However, it was already inconceivable that a mere god was able to injure him. Rumble. Soul 13 did not waste any more time. He had to kill Bufang at once. Only by killing Bufang would he feel at ease. He stepped on the building. The building immediately swayed unsteadily and was in imminent danger. The bricks of the building were completely shattered. As he punched out, it seemed to contain the power of thunder. The pressure that belonged to a soul overlord erupted, and it was wrapped in this punch. The color of heaven and earth changed, and half the sky turned pitch black. When a spirit overlord got serious, who could resist? On the other side, the humans and the soul demons fought madly. With the help of stinky tofu, the humans really suppressed the soul demons for a while. One soul demon after another spontaneously combusted after eating stinky tofu. The divine fire danced in Bufang's eyes. The next moment, Bufang stretched out a finger. 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 5 fingers shot out at the same time. Finally, the flame grew stronger. They seemed to have transformed into the 5 supreme laws of the universe. 50-50 was a good number for his fingers. The flames on each finger represented a type of law, a type of extremity. After becoming a god, what Bufang needed to do was to upgrade his god fire. The power of his divine sense spread and swept around him like a storm. A dazzling light burst out of the god of cooking's menu. Bufang's god of cooking's, I was also staring at the flame. He stared at it until his eyes turned red and tears were about to fall. Buzz, finally, the aura of the flame soared into the sky. Behind Bufang, 5 wheels of law were spinning. They resonated with the divine flame. The color of heaven and earth changed. Half of the sky turned black, which belonged to Soul 13's domain. Half of the sky, on the other hand, became colorful. After the colorful scene, there was a vast river of stars rolling backward. Every star was blinking in the river of stars, shining brightly. Everyone could not help looking up at the sky. Yu and Xiaobai did not think much of it. It was normal for any phenomenon to happen to Bufang. The seriously injured divine emperor, leaning against the door of the restaurant, was dumbfounded. This kind of phenomenon had only appeared in the records. This was a heaven illuminator. Rumble. The divine flame's aura kept rising, and its scorching temperature made people's hearts palpitate. IMO watched with a complicated look in her eyes. Looking at Bufong, who was confronting Soul 13, she felt a little ashamed and ashamed. Under Soul 13's pressure, she was as weak as a worm. No wonder the immortal spirit empress died. Soul 13 was almost invincible. She knew that even if she had given the fruit of law to the crown princess, she would not have been able to become the hope of mankind like Bufong. She might even have been killed by Soul 13 in an instant. This soul demon had truly become a great demon. Her face burned when she thought of how she had questioned Bufong and asked for Bufong's fruit of law. I must have lost my mind. The crown princess is so weak. How can she shoulder such a great responsibility? The crown princess. Imo turned her head and looked at the crown princess. Suddenly, her pupils constricted. She found that when Xiao Yinyu looked up at the starry sky, her body was bursting with dazzling light. It was as if she was resonating with the thousands of stars in the sky. A heaven illuminator. The crown princess is actually illuminating the heavens. Isn't it said that only those who have comprehended the 5 supreme laws of the universe can illuminate the heavens and break through to the god realm? Could all this be because of Bufong? The heaven illuminator is created by Bufong, and the crown princess is affected by it and benefited from it. IMO wept with joy. At least, the crown princess did not let the immortal spirit empress down. The crown princess's change also attracted the attention of many people. Many people were happy that another genius was about to be born among the human race. The soul demons, of course, would not allow this to happen. Several numbered soul demons sped toward Xiao Yinyu. They were going to crush the last hope of mankind. Immortal energy surged out of Mo's body. She would not allow the soul demons to get close to her. She had wanted to live with the crown princess's help, but now she knew that if the soul demons won, she would not be able to live. A sword light swept across heaven and earth. Gold armor flew over on his sword, pushed back 3 numbered soul demons, and protected Xiao Yinyu, who was breaking through. His cultivation base was extremely strong, and he was considered one of the top god kings. The Titan crown prince had gone mad from the killing. Even though he was coughing up blood, he did not retreat. Fight, fight, fight. At this moment, all that was left in his mind was his fighting spirit and the stench of stinky tofu. Rumble. The heaven illuminator disappeared. Bufong opened his eyes. Before him, Soul 13 was approaching. Crack, crack. In the next moment, Soul 13's hand was covered with insect scales and turned into a sharp knife. He slashed down with the knife, intending to cut Bufong in half. Bufong took a deep breath. Then he clenched his fist and crushed the flame in his hand. A rumbling sound rang out. The flame darted and began to cover Bufong's body. The silver flame spread in an instant. In a flash, Bufong turned into a man of fire. The dragon bone knife, the vermilion robe, the white tiger heaven stove, the black turtle constellation wok, the Chilan transmigration ladle, all the god of cooking sets were unleashed. At this moment, Bufong made his appearance. Moreover, the flame covered his god of cooking set, which actually complemented each other. The surface of the dragon bone kitchen knife was covered with a layer of flame, and the vermilion robe had turned into a flaming robe. The black turtle constellation wok was burning over his head, and the white tiger stove was splashing flames under his feet. He held the knife in his left hand and the ladle in his right. His bare skin was also covered with flames. At this moment, except for the god of cooking's eye, Bufong's whole body was shrouded in flames. It was as if Bufong had turned into an ancient god of fire. You're just playing tricks. Soul 13's face was cold. He did not want to talk nonsense. With a slash, the power of sin spread. The insect scales covered and stacked on top of each other. As the slender knife approached Bufong, it suddenly became extremely thick and heavy, stacking layer by layer, turning into a heavy machete. You and the others were so shocked by this aura that they could not even open their eyes. Bufong's god of cooking's eye flashed. In his eyes, the 3 red dots on Soul 13's body were as dazzling as the moon in the night. He raised the flaming dragon bone kitchen knife. It collided with the heavy machete. Bam! A tremendous force exploded out. Bufong was pushed back by the knife. Flames sprouted from the knife. Soul 13 pressed down on Bufong, who tried his best to resist. He flew out of the Luo family's skyscraper and fell to the ground. Bufong stamped his foot on the ground, causing it to explode. Out of the skyscraper, the ground was as fragile as tofu. Bam! 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 Bufong kept retreating. You're too weak. You're as weak as a clumsy pig. Boom! He swung the machete fiercely. In an instant, Bufong was sent flying away. Knife energy swept out and sent Bufong flying backward. Shrouded in divine flame, Bufong retreated at high speed like a fireball. Everywhere he passed, everything was burned black. Suddenly, a whistling sound rang out. The flames approached at high speed. Bufong held the dragon bone kitchen knife with one hand and swung it down. The kitchen knife of affliction. Did a pig provoke you? Why do you look down on a pig? Bufong's faint voice rang out. He swung the knife back. This time, he made 99,999 slashes. The power was peerless. A clanging sound rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. Go! Bufong pressed his knife against Soul 13's insect-scaled machete, and with a skillful force, he raised the machete high into the air, as if he was drawing a Tai Chi diagram. Soul 13 stretched out his arm, and the red in his armpit shone as bright as the sun. If I don't strike now, when? The ladle in his other hand slapped out. It hit Soul 13's armpit. Crack! A soft, crisp sound rang out, but it was not loud. Soul 13, however, was stunned. The pain spread from his armpit and numbed half of his body, causing the corner of his mouth to twitch. What's going on? Shrouded in flames, Bufong's eyes lit up. It seems to work. Although Soul 13 had few weaknesses, it was enough. I'll hit your armpit, Bufong scolded. Again, Soul 13 did not know why he felt that pain, but he did not want to experience it again. So he clamped his armpit tightly. However, he was wrong. This was because Bufong's ladle did not hit his armpit this time. Instead, it hit his eyes. Soul 13 closed his eyes subconsciously. The eye on his forehead flashed with a brilliant light. Bufong felt a sense of crisis. So, I'll hit your armpit again, Bufong shouted again. Soul 13's body trembled. He clamped his armpit tightly and covered his eyes. Do you think I'm stupid? How could I hit the same thing twice? However, neither his armpit nor his eyes were attacked. Soul 13 froze. The next moment, he felt a chill run down his spine. The ladle cut through the air with a tearing sound, and the scorching flame burned everything. From the bottom to the top, the ladle slammed into Soul 13's lower body. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. For a moment, Soul 13 heard two beautiful sounds of himself breaking out of his shell. One was the sound of insect scales breaking, and the other. What was that? Chapter 1580. The Qilin Transmigration Ladle, covered in silver flames, drew a beautiful arc in the air as Bufong swung it. Then from the bottom to the top, it hit the weakness of Soul 13's lower body. That was the spot that the god of cooking's eye had seen, and it was also the most suitable spot for Soul 13, an ingredient. Soul 13 never thought that Bufong would do such a shameless thing. What happened to attacking the eyes and armpits? Why isn't he playing according to common sense? Bam! Soul 13's expression changed. The pain did not only affect his flesh, but also went deep into his soul, making him shiver all over. He felt so uncomfortable that he almost fell from the clouds. He bent his body in the air for an unknown amount of time before he slowly came to a stop. His eyes were fixed on Bufong, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. This damned chef must be cut into pieces. Shrouded in the divine flame, Bufong looked like a god of fire walking out of the depths of the universe, coquettish and coquettish. Holding a kitchen knife in one hand and a ladle in the other, he waved them, sending sparks flying in all directions. An ordinary person's scalp would go numb. Bufong narrowed his eyes. A soul overlord was, after all, a soul overlord. Even if his weakness was seen through, he would not be knocked down so easily. His ladle had hit Soul 13's weakness and was even attached to it by the divine flame. However, it did not cause too much damage to him. The insect scale armor that was split open quickly healed. In fact, he never thought that he would be able to defeat a soul overlord so easily, especially a heaven god soul overlord. Soul 13 sucked in a cold breath, shivering in midair. Finally, his killing intent overflowed. The wings on his back flapped, and he flew across the void in a flash. Bufang had found his weakness, but he did not have the means to completely break through it. After a few exchanges, Soul 13 was a little impatient. Buzz, Soul 13 threw out a palm. The power of sin gathered. Among the 7 sins, the power of gluttony surged out like thick ink, blotting out the sky. Then it turned into a palm and slapped Bufang. Bam! That palm turned into an incomparably huge palm. He swung it down from the sky. The black turtle constellation walk spun above Bufang's head, blocking the palm strike. A clanging sound was heard. It was like collapsing ink. The entire ground turned pitch black. The palm exploded, and the ground caved in deeply. Bufang, who was at the center of the palm, only felt a heavy force pressing down on him, causing his face to turn slightly pale. That familiar feeling, that familiar pressure, it was the same pressure he felt from the heavenly god's palm. The two of them were exactly the same. Kacha kacha! The ground exploded, and a shocking ravine appeared. Broken rocks and cracks were everywhere. It was a ghastly sight. Soul 13 hovered in midair. He did not look at Bufang's position. The energy between his eyebrows was gathering rapidly. Then, a beam of light shot out from between his eyebrows. A loud and clear phoenix cry resounded. Behind Soul 13, a pitch-black phoenix spread its wings and soared into the sky. Its sonorous cry seemed to break through the 9 heavens. The moment the phoenix cry rang out, Princess Xiao Yanyu, who was on the battlefield, was startled. She turned her head to look at the phoenix that was burning with pitch-black flames. The Lord of the Phoenix nest? IMO murmured inwardly. The Lord of the Phoenix and the Empress of a mortal spirit had fought Soul 13 together. Unfortunately, the Empress had died, and there had been no news of the Lord of the Phoenix. Now, it seemed that the Lord of the Phoenix had been contaminated like the Dragon Emperor and had become a soul demon. This was not good news for them, nor was it good news for all mankind. Soul 13 stepped on the Phoenix's head, narrowed his eyes, and pointed straight at Bufang. Kill that human. Soul 13 instructed the Lord of Phoenixes. The Lord of the Phoenix's eyes were scarlet, and her whole body was burning with black flames. Like a madman, she rushed madly toward the billowing black smoke on the ground. Her sharp claws swooped down from the 9 heavens like a goshawk and grabbed a vole on the ground. Boom! The ground exploded. The Lord of the Phoenix spread her wings and soared into the sky. Her claws were clutching the black turtle constellation walk, which was hovering over Bufang's head. Bufang took a step forward. Then, he leaped high into the air and landed on the Phoenix's claws. Holding the Phoenix's claws, he slowly moved upward. The fluffy feathers of the Phoenix fluttered and tickled her skin. Bufang furrowed his brows. He felt a great pressure. In fact, although Bufang had broken through to the god realm, his strength was still too weak. He could probably only fight a half-step heaven god, and this was because he had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't even be able to fight against the god emperor. Even if he saw through her weakness, he did not have the corresponding strength to give her a thunderous blow. Bufang flipped over and landed on the Phoenix's back. The flaming Phoenix soared into the sky. This was the Lord of the Phoenix, who was a god emperor. Just like the Dragon Emperor that Bufang had encountered before, this Lord of the Phoenix was even stronger. Bufang and the flaming Phoenix were entangled in midair, going back and forth. Grabbing the Qilin Transmigration Ladle, Bufang kept hitting the Phoenix's head. The Qilin Transmigration Ladle was so powerful that it could shatter Soul 13's insect scales. It should be noted that even a god emperor would find it difficult to shatter Sol 13's defense with a full blow. Every time Lord Phoenix was hit, he felt severe pain. The aura of the Qilin in the ladle put great pressure on him. Sol 13 watched with a gloomy expression. Finally, the Lord of the Phoenix fell from the sky and smashed hard on the ground. With a bang, a shocking explosion rang out, and rubble rolled out in all directions. Trash! Sol 13 cursed, his eyes cold. In the ruins, dragging the Lord of the Phoenix's head, Bufang walked step by step out of the ruins. The divine flame enveloped his body, greatly improving Bufang's strength and fighting prowess. Sol 13's face was gloomy as he looked at Bufang, who was walking out of the ruins. The next moment, he raised his hand. Buzz, in his hand, a stream of energy that seemed to emerge from the chaos shot out. It was the energy of a heaven god. Bufang leaned slightly to one side. He dodged the energy blast in an instant. However, Sol 13's target was not Bufang, but the Lord of the Phoenix behind Bufang. Bang! Black energy seeped into the Lord of the Phoenix's body. The next moment, the Lord of the Phoenix's body swelled as if it could not bear the power. Like a balloon filled with too much water, it began to twist and swell. Bufang turned his head and looked at the swelling phoenix. His pupils constricted. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion took place. The Lord of the Phoenix's body completely exploded. It was as if a god emperor had self-detonated. When the immortal spirit empress chose to self-detonate, she had seriously injured Sol 13, and it took him a long time to recover. Today, Sol 13 wanted to let Bufang feel the impact of self-detonation. Boom! Boom! It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. Sol 13's figure sped away in a flash, out of the range of the explosion. With the ground as the center, terrible energy spread in all directions. Even the rubble was ground to pieces by the energy. It was a catastrophic explosion of destruction. Heaven and earth fell silent because of it. The light of the explosion made the world as bright as day. Whether it was the soul demons or the humans, they all stopped and looked at the scene in horror. The fluctuation in the energy made the humans' hair stand on end. The shy divine emperor, leaning against the door of the restaurant, had a dull look in his eyes. That's the self-detonation of an emperor expert. How could Bufang survive such an explosion? Sol 13 sneered in midair. He applauded himself for being so quick-witted. I can't believe that stinky chef dares to trick me. Even now, my soul still throbs from time to time, and I feel very uncomfortable. In that case, I'll give him a taste of his own medicine. Isn't the Lord of Phoenix the divine beast of mankind? I'll let him give you a destructive blow. The energy of the explosion slowly dissipated. The Lord of Phoenix's body was gone. After all, he had self-detonated, so his fleshly body could no longer exist. A huge, round, bottomless pit was blasted into the ground. There seemed to be gray smoke lingering in the pit. Around the pit, rubble was rolling down. At the edge, Bufang sat there with his head bowed. He was panting slightly. The divine flame on him had dissipated. The vermilion robe on his body was also tattered. The vermilion robe, which had lost its artifact spirit, had lost its previous domineering dominance. However, the vermilion robe was slowly recovering. Bufang looked up. There was golden light swirling in his eyes. He looked straight ahead with the god of cooking's eye. There, the Lord of Phoenix's broken soul was drifting aimlessly. Bufang raised his hand and beckoned, and the broken soul flew toward him. The vermilion robe produced a strange suction force, which sucked the broken soul of the phoenix into it. The recovery ability of the vermilion robe instantly increased, and before long, it was restored to its original appearance. Bufang, on the other hand, only looked a little more wretched. The vermilion robe's artifact spirit was the vermilion bird. The phoenix and the vermilion bird had the same origin, so its broken energy could be fused into the vermilion robe. The pit was huge. Standing at its edge, Bufang looked as small as an ant. But Bufang did not care. He looked up at Soul 13 in the sky with a serious face. He felt that things were getting tricky. Even the 5 laws of the universe and the divine flame could not do anything to him. Bufang did not know how to deal with him. Host, please pay attention. Do you want to take the God's only realm cooking test? The system's serious voice rang in Bufang's mind. At first, Bufang could only hear his own breathing and the whistling of the wind in the pit. The system's voice was so obvious when it appeared. It was as if it was his last life-saving straw. Bufang's eyes lit up. As long as he passed the usual realm test, his cultivation base would break through. He would reach the peak of the God's only realm. In that case, he might be able to put up a fight against Soul 13. After all, the stronger he was, the more obvious the effect of the 5 supreme laws of the universe would be. Then, the God of Cooking's eye would not be so useless. He exhaled. Bufang felt that everything around him had quieted down. In that case, he had no other choice. Do you want to take the cooking test? The system asked. Yes, Bufang said. As soon as he finished speaking, Bufang felt a strange force envelop him. He felt that his spiritual consciousness was being pulled into a strange space. In reality, Soul 13's eyes narrowed as he looked at Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground with his head bowed. He could clearly sense Bufang's condition. This chef actually chose to break through when facing me. Isn't he courting death? How could he, Soul 13, let that chef break through so easily? The Black Turtle Constellation Wok, the Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, the Chilean Transmigration Ladle, and the White Tiger Stove hovered around Bufang. Judging from Bufang's posture, was he going to cook? Was he going to cook in the middle of a fight? Who the hell are you looking down on? Soul 13's eyes turned scarlet. The lines on his body squirmed as he grew taller and taller. His body, which was originally an ordinary human, suddenly turned into a giant that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Then, his mouth opened so wide that it seemed to be able to swallow a star. Soul 13 growled at Bufang as a suction force emerged from his mouth. The terrible suction force seemed to want to swallow Bufang and everything around him into its mouth in the Luo family skyscraper. In the restaurant, the door of the restaurant suddenly opened. A fat figure slowly walked out with cat-like steps. Lord Go yawned. He glanced sideways and saw Soul 13, who was tens of thousands of feet tall. Then his exquisite dog paw reached out in front of him. Suddenly, everything around him seemed to pause. The law of time spread. Even Soul 13, who was a soul overlord, was affected by Lord Go's law of time. Just like that, Lord Go walked gracefully with his cat-like steps and came in front of Soul 13, who had transformed into a giant. Plop! The law of time dissipated. The huge suction force from Soul 13's mouth made Lord Go's dog flesh tremble. Oh! Soul 13's pupils constricted as if he didn't expect that a dog would appear in front of him. The dog was holding a heaven god's bone. It hovered in front of Soul 13. Then, Lord Go stuffed the heaven god's bone into his mouth and closed his mouth with a crack. The heaven god's bone was crushed in an instant. Chapter 1581. Oh, a fat black dog. Soul 13's enormous body blotted out the sky, and he was even larger than the Titan Divine Emperor. His head seemed to be about to break through the clouds and rush into the starry sky. However, he still saw the dog. It was the black dog that suddenly appeared in front of him. What a fat dog! Soul 13 narrowed his eyes, and a rumbling sound came from his huge mouth. This was his voice. The suction force in his mouth did not weaken. It was still erupting, trying to swallow the fat Lord Go. In fact, to Soul 13, the black dog was about the size of a butt, and it was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. This was the horror of gluttony soul overlords. They could devour everything, and they were somewhat similar to Tao Tai. Lord Go, in front of the Luo family's skyscraper, you narrowed her eyes slightly. She was standing on the top floor of the skyscraper, her long black dress fluttering in the wind. It's useless even if the Lord Go makes a move. This Soul 13 is already a soul overlord. The heaven god's bone is useless against him. The shy divine emperor smiled bitterly. He was not very optimistic about the Lord Go's chances. He felt that the only means the Lord Go could use to deal with Soul 13 was the strange heaven god's bone. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the Lord Go bit the heaven god's bone and shattered it with a crunch. As soon as this scene appeared, everyone was stunned. The shy divine emperor sat up with wide eyes, as if he was suffering from a serious illness. What's going on? What is the Lord Go going to do? Why did he crush the heaven god's bone? Boom! Boom! The battle between the human camp and the soul demon camp was in full swing. Because of the stinky tofu, the human side had a slight advantage. However, the human experts were still not strong enough to deal with the numbered soul demons. Perhaps they were just resisting by relying on the stinky tofu. Now, both the human side and the soul demon side were actually waiting for the main battlefield to turn out. That battle would determine the final outcome of this war. As long as the gluttony soul overlord could spare a hand, no one on the human side could resist him. Kacha Kacha. The heavenly deity's bones shattered, crushed by the Lord Go's bite. He chewed for a while. The residue of the heavenly god's bone turned into a beam of light and flowed into the Lord Go's mouth like water. The fat on Lord Go's body was shaking. Underneath, Bu Fong, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened his eyes. He glanced in the direction of the Lord Go and exhaled deeply. Bu Fong was slightly startled, as if he was also puzzled by the Lord Go's attack. But now, these were not what Bu Fong wanted to think about. What he wanted to do now was to do a good job in the cooking test. Only by completing the dish test would his cultivation base break through, and only then would he have a chance to fight against the Spirit Master. Therefore, Bu Fong's heart sank. Around him, the god of cooking sets floated in midair. Bu Fong's eyes narrowed slightly. As soon as he got into the state of cooking, Bu Fong paid no attention to what was going on outside and only focused on cooking. Swish, he waved the dragon bone kitchen knife. Then Bu Fong began his test. Soul 13 squinted at the fat dog. No matter how hard he tried, all the gravel around him was sucked into his mouth. His deep breaths even caused a storm to gather between heaven and earth, affecting the balance of energy in this part of the world. But the dog was still indifferent. There's something strange about this dog. But does it think it dares to fight me just because it ate a heavenly god's bone? Are there so many dogs who overestimate themselves nowadays? Soul 13's eyes focused, and the scarlet light in them grew brighter. Then he slowly raised his paw. It was a paw covered with insect scales, which were condensed from the essence of the soul demon's energy and were originally one with it. They were incomparably tough, comparable to the divine weapons in the universe. Rumble. The 100,000 feet tall Soul 13 waved his paw, which was as huge as a mountain, blotting out the sky and slapping down toward Lord Go. Lord Go crushed the heavenly god's bone with his teeth. Then he burped and furrowed his brows in disgust. Bu Fong boy sweet and sour ribs are still the best, Lord Go sighed. I think dog meat might be more delicious, Soul 13 said coldly. As soon as his voice rang out, the paw approached in a flash, bringing with it a terrible aura and a creepy pressure. Rumble. Lord Go jerked his head up, his eyes bursting with sharpness. Dog meat, Lord Go sneered. In the face of Soul 13's paw, all the dog meat on Lord Go's body shivered, starting from his chubby, but in piling up in front of his body. Finally, he opened his mouth wide, and a mighty energy seemed to be brewing in his mouth. When the energy had been brewing to the extreme, it burst out in an uproar. Facing the huge paw that blotted out the sky, Lord Go opened his mouth and let out a bark. Woof. At first, it sounded like a dog's bark, but if one listened carefully, it sounded like a dragon's roar or a phoenix's cry. It was as if a peerless savage beast had awakened, bringing with it a terror that made the whole universe tremble. Bam! Bam! Soul 13's huge, scarlet eyes constricted. He was horrified to find that his paw could not fall any further. It was pushed away by the barking energy coming out of Lord Go's mouth. How could a dog bark resist the paw of a soul overlord? He was a soul overlord. In the human chaotic universe, he was equivalent to a heaven god level expert. How could this dog block his attack? Buzz, blood-colored lines spread across Lord Go's body. Lord Go's body instantly became slender. Slowly, a ripping sound rang out. Time seemed to stop. Lord Go bared his teeth, looking very fierce. Bam! Like a cannonball, he shot out and appeared in front of the paw in a flash. Then he raised his exquisite paw and slapped it hard. A loud rumble rang out. Soul 13 broke free from the shackles of the law of time, and his eyes burst into a ferocious light. The little paw collided with Soul 13's paw, which was as huge as a mountain. Soul 13's mountain-like body shook violently, and he inadvertently took a step back. That one step caused the ground to cave in. Lord Go's body also flew backward in midair like a meatball. He steadied himself. Lord Go bared his teeth, and energy seemed to be escaping from his mouth. It seemed that the power of the heaven god's bone was constantly fusing with him. Soul 13 froze. You froze. The shy divine emperor, who did not think highly of Lord Go, was also stunned. The paw of a soul overlord collided with Lord Go, and they were evenly matched. How is this possible? Had Lord Go become a heaven god? How could this dog be a heaven god? This didn't make sense. He was just a high-grade god before, not even a god king. How could he become a heaven god now? How could he be so unreasonable? Are the people and dogs in this restaurant all freaking monsters? The shy divine emperor's heart trembled. Besides, how could this dog become a heaven god in an era where heaven gods did not appear? Unless the shy divine emperor froze. His pupils narrowed, and he sucked in a cold breath. This dog is as annoying as the chef. Soul 13 turned over his palm, which was covered with cracks and densely packed lines. His eyes burst into a ferocious light, and he felt incredulous. This dog had actually shattered his insect scale armor. But Soul 13 moved again. He clenched his paw into a fist and threw it out again. He had underestimated his enemy. He did not expect that a dog could burst out with such fighting prowess. It was even more unreliable than the chef. In that case, he would smash everything. Bam! The punch came with unparalleled power and a terrible aura. It was so powerful that it seemed to sweep across the sky and turn the world upside down. It was as if all the energy in the world had been sucked away. Die. Soul 13's body was tens of thousands of feet tall, and his eyes were even bigger than Lord Go's. However, it still locked on a Lord Dog's body. With a murderous aura, it ferociously smashed its fist down. Time paused again. Lord Go sped forward like a cannonball, barking and slapping his paw forward. Bam! The collision this time made Soul 13 a little crazy. This made Soul 13 somewhat mad. Why was the law of time so irritating? Boom! Lord Go flew backward and smashed hard on the ground, causing it to explode. Soul 13, on the other hand, staggered back several steps. The two collided again, and they were equally matched. Soul 13 stopped devouring everything. The Titan Divine Dynasty's Titan incarnation was very strong, but it was too clumsy. Facing a nimble dog, it did not have an advantage. So, Soul 13's body shrank. Then, he transformed into his human form. The wings on his back fluttered. Then, he shot out like a beam of silver light. The power of sin was gathering in his hand. He floated to the spot where Lord Go had been smashed into the ground, then threw punch after punch at Lord Go. The ground was instantly bombarded repeatedly, shattering and trembling unceasingly. A beam of black light shot up as Lord Go's paw slashed across Soul 13's face. A claw mark was left on Soul 13's face. It's the law of time again. Soul 13 was furious. Damn it, damn it, damn it, Soul 13 bellowed. He sensed an uneasy aura from the black dog. It made him more and more irritable. Buzz, his figure sped forward like a stream of light. In a flash, he appeared in front of Lord Go. The Soul Overlord's speed was too fast. Rumble. Before Lord Go could react, he was knocked flying backward and smashed hard on the ground. In the distance, all the spectators sucked in their breaths. The shy Divine Emperor was dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the spot where Lord Go had fallen. There seemed to be something dying there. Time was flowing backward. Soul 13 focused his eyes. Even through the insect scales, he felt his hair stand on end. This feeling, the fat all over Lord Go's body, was shivering. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, his fat melted like ice cubes. Even Lord Go had become thin from being fat. Moreover, he was not just a normal thin man. From forepaws on the ground, he stood up straight. The power of law turned into specks of light, swirling around Lord Go's body. Then, his dog form faded and turned into a human. It was a human whose face could not be seen clearly, but one could see that his body was very well proportioned and perfect. Lord Go has turned into a human. At the top of the Luo family skyscraper, Yu sucked in a cold breath. The shy divine emperor was still in a daze. Hades' heir's mouth was wide open, and his jaw was about to drop to the ground. Damn it! That mangy dog can turn into a human. Bufang's eyelids twitched as he was cooking. Even though he did not pay attention to what was going on outside, he had a strange feeling in his heart. He opened his eyes and looked up at Lord Go, who had turned from a dog into a human in the sky. A surging aura rushed out of Lord Go's body, and the law of time was boiling. Bufang felt that the aura was somewhat familiar. It was the aura of a heaven god. Chapter 1582. Buzz. Bufang felt as though he had entered a new world. This place was like a kitchen, isolated from the rest of the world. This was the test given to Bufang by the system. It was a test to upgrade dishes. This was actually a routine. Bufang's cultivation didn't need to be like other people who needed to level up slowly. Every time he reached a new realm, as long as he could pass the dish test, he would have a great leap. Bufang was quite familiar with this point. However, although he was familiar with this test, Bufang didn't dare to relax for even a moment. If he failed the test, he would be punished, and it could even put Bufang in a hopeless situation. That was why Bufang was serious about this advancement test. The system's serious voice echoed in his head, telling him some things to pay attention to. Finally, a light flashed in front of Bufang's eyes. Then, it was the cooking method of a dish. Host, please pay attention. The dish for the advancement test: divine fire snail rice noodles. Host, please cook the required dish to advance. The system's serious voice sounded. Bufang didn't answer it. No doubt this was a new dish. Bufang's mind was attracted by this dish. At this moment, what he needed to do was cook this dish. Bufang's face was a little strange. Snail rice noodles. This was a dish from Earth, but this dish had something strange. Just like the stinky tofu, this dish was famous for its smell. The smell it exuded was the same as the stinky tofus. Perhaps only people who knew how to taste could understand the stench of snail rice noodles. What a coincidence! The system's dish for the advancement test was actually snail rice noodles. He narrowed his eyes. Bufang's mind flickered. He began to prepare the ingredients. To make an authentic snail rice noodles, he needed many ingredients. Among them, the selection of snails was very important. There were also some other ingredients. In fact, this dish ate the ingredients and the soup base. The snail rice noodles were prepared by the system. This was good news for Bufang. With a thought, a piece of dragon ridge rib appeared in his hand, and he cut it into a thin piece. The snails were provided by the system. There was a pot full of snails in it. With a shake of his hand, he tossed out a ball of silver divine flame. He controlled the divine fire and sent it into the pot, causing the divine fire to cover the snails. The moment the snail worm sensed the divine fire, not only was it not burned to ashes by the flames, but it seemed to be bathing in water as it breathed in and out the divine fire. All the impurities were expelled. The impurities in the snails greatly affected the entire dish. Perhaps this was the reason why this dish was called divine fire snail rice noodle. The other ingredients, such as the secret pickled bamboo shoots, pickled cabbage, pickled radish, etc., as well as some seasonings and herbs, were all prepared. Then, he placed them on small plates. With the black turtle constellation wok in his hand, he heated the wok and poured some oil into it. After preparing the two-colored bean curd, Bufong waited for the oil to boil before pouring it into the wok. TSS, TSS, TSS. In the wok, the bean curd rolled and slowly became crispy. He took out the oil from the fried bean curd. From the heaven and earth farmland, he took out a can of abyssal chili sauce that had been hidden for a long time. After being improved by Bufong, he made chili oil. Then, he began to make the soup base. He stewed the dragon bone soup and prepared the soup. On the other side, he began to cook the snails. First, he fried the pickled bamboo shoots and pickled cabbage. After that, he removed the wok and put them on a plate. In another wok, he began to cook the snails. He added the chopped purple garlic, sun mother ginger, and other ingredients. After that, he added the snails and began to stir-fry them. After adding water, he poured in the bone soup to boil. The snails in the wok were boiling, rolling, and spitting out the divine fire, which was very dazzling. Next, Bufong needed to control the temperature of the snail rice noodle. Now, he was making the soup base, and the taste of the soup base would determine the taste of this dish. Bufong's divine sense surged out. He didn't dare to be distracted. It fused into the wok and began to sense the changes of the ingredients in the wok. When the snail meat fell from the wok, it flowed into the wok. At this time, Bufong poured the chili oil that he had prepared into the wok. Gurgle, gurgle. Bufong looked at the boiling snail rice noodle in the wok, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. This dish at this point was almost ready. He took out the noodles. The noodles of the snail rice noodle had to be coarse, so that the snail rice noodle would taste sour and refreshing. He took out a blue and white porcelain bowl. Bufong poured the soup base into the bowl. The soup base was covered with a layer of chili oil. It was bright red, and it looked very appetizing. He added the smooth noodles, placed the fried dragon in it, and added the other ingredients. The most important was the pickled bamboo shoots, because the pickled bamboo shoots were the essence of the snail rice noodle. When Bufong took out a white cloth and wiped off the oil around the porcelain bowl, rays of light suddenly burst out from the porcelain bowl. It was so dazzling that people couldn't even open their eyes. A sour stench filled the air, causing Bufong to raise his eyebrows. Compared to stinky tofu, the taste of the snail rice noodle was even better. When the two stinky tofu combined, they would be invincible. However, unlike stinky tofu, the snail rice noodle looked very good. Just looking at it would arouse one's appetite, and one could not help but want to eat it. The bright red soup base and the fragrant papillion steak looked perfect, except for the stench. Rumble. The aura around Soul 13 kept shaking. His cold eyes were fixed on the figure in the distance, which was slowly rising to its feet. Yes, it was a figure. The black dog had actually turned into a human in front of him and under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Of course, the key was not the black dog's transformation. There was nothing unusual about it. As long as it was a fierce beast or a divine beast with a certain level of cultivation, it could transform into a human. However, this person exuded an aura that made his heart palpitate. This was very unusual. It was the aura of a heaven god in this world. Yes, it was definitely the aura of a heaven god. Soul 13 could not be mistaken. After all, he was always on guard against the heaven god of this world. He did not expect that this heaven god was actually a dog. I'll kill him before he completely transforms into a heaven god. Soul 13 moved. His sharp claws tore through the air, and the power of sin condensed in his hand. Then, he threw it at Lord Go. The speed was so fast that the void shattered in an instant. Lord Go had turned into a human figure. It was the figure of a man. A gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Lord Go, I seem to have thought of something incredible. Bufong boy, you'd better do your best. Lord Go said. Then he seemed to sigh. The next moment, he raised his hand, which was covered with the law of time, which seemed to emit a bright light. Then, he pointed a finger at the black power of sin that was shooting toward him. Boom! Like a punctured balloon, the power of sin dissipated in an instant. He's really a heaven god, a modern-day heaven god. Soul 13's pupils constricted. From this figure, he sensed a faint connection with the chaos space. He had learned that all the modern-day heaven gods had entered the chaos space. Therefore, even if the soul demons invaded this world, these heaven gods would not appear. However, he felt that this statement did not make sense. After all, this universe was the base of the heaven gods. Once all the living beings in this universe were wiped out, their power would be affected. Therefore, it was impossible for the heaven gods to stand by and do nothing. Now, this modern-day heaven god had finally appeared. However, it was too late. He, Soul 13, had long become a soul overlord. He could even fight a modern-day heaven god. If he could not defeat him, he could just run away. Soul 13's pupils constricted. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. His vision blurred. The figure of Lord Go appeared in front of him. He threw a punch at him. The punch seemed to have become the center of the world, and everything was attracted to it. This was the power of a heaven god. Every move he made could cause heaven and earth to change. Boom! Soul 13 did not flinch. Instead, he raised his fist and threw a punch. Their fists collided. Boom! 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 Then, the two of them seemed to turn into two beams of light, one silver and the other white, that shot up into the sky from the ground, broke through the sky, and rushed into the starry sky. The battle between the two was very terrifying. Just a little bit of their aura was enough to cause the stars to explode. The humans were cheering. The heaven god had finally appeared. They were saved. You, on the other hand, had a stunned look in her eyes. Lord Go is a heaven god? How did Lord Go become a heaven god? The shy divine emperor was also dumbfounded. It turned out that the heaven god he had been looking forward to had been by his side all along. However, he did not see him. The humans cheered for the heaven god's rescue. You and the others, on the other hand, were shocked by Lord Go's identity. Hades' era kept murmuring, his eyes dull. That mangy dog is actually a heaven god, and he's a modern-day heaven god who controls the law of time. Could he be heaven god time? But that mangy dog is a heaven god. How could he end up in a corner of the netherworld? Why is his strength so weak? Or maybe Lord Go is the reincarnation of a heaven god? That can't be right. A heaven god is not stupid. Why would he reincarnate into a dog? Hades' era was dumbfounded. It was as if the richest man in the country had suddenly appeared among his classmates. How terrifying. Bam! The battle in the starry sky had almost reached its climax. Soul 13 and the figure transformed from Lord Go were locked in a fierce battle. Soul 13 was very excited. This modern-day heaven god was incomplete, and his strength was not perfect. Moreover, he could not hold on for long. Although he did not know the reason, this was his chance. If he could devour a human heaven god, his realm would be completely stabilized, and he might even be able to break through to a higher level. Greed, desire, excitement, all kinds of emotions erupted. It made him want nothing more than to chop this black dog into pieces and devour it piece by piece. That delicious taste, that fragrant smell. Oh, suddenly, Soul 13 paused. He found that there seemed to be a fragrance lingering in his nostrils. It was a real fragrance, not something he had imagined. This smell. Soul 13 jerked his head down and looked down. There, the chef sitting cross-legged on the ground had finished cooking. A rich aroma wafted out from the chef's position. Gulp. Soul 13 unconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Bam! While he was lost in thought, the figure transformed from Lord Go approached in a flash. The law of time turned into a river of time and space that flowed backward and smashed hard on Soul 13's body. It was a very powerful move. Soul 13 held miserably. The insect scales all over his body seemed to be on the verge of breaking and cracking. In the blink of an eye, he was smashed into a huge planet. With a loud boom, the huge star actually began to collapse and disintegrate. On the crumbling planet, Soul 13 stepped on the surface of a broken boulder and stared coldly at Lord Go. The space between his eyebrows split open, revealing a rolling eye. This is the eye of sin of us, soul overlords. It is the source of our 7 sins. With this power, I grant you death. Soul 13 growled. Then, all the rubble on his body crumbled. In front of the eye, black and red energy was gathering. It was the power of sin, the power of gluttony that represented the realm of soul overlords. The gathering of this power seemed to cause the entire chaos verse to grow restless and uneasy. The figure transformed from Lord Go looked up into the depths of the chaos space. He sighed. Then, the aura on his body began to weaken. Lord Go felt helpless. He wanted to kill Soul 13 in a short time. He had to regain his heaven god power. But he did not expect that his strength would decline so badly. He could not kill Soul 13 now. Now, it seemed that he would be killed instead. This was very uncomfortable. Soul 13 seemed to have noticed this as well. He could not stop laughing excitedly. He could already imagine the scene of this heaven god being devoured by him. It was so tempting that he could not help but drool. Slurp, slurp, his saliva dripped. The eye on Soul 13's forehead suddenly burst in a bright light. Go to hell. Buzz, it was as if a woman shrouded in darkness was screaming. In an instant, the black and red power of sin turned into a straight beam of light and shot toward the heaven god, transformed from Lord Go. The beam of black and red light streaked across the sky in an instant. Wherever it passed through stars and caused them to explode. The sun and moon lost their light. The figure transformed from Lord Go stared expressionlessly at the beam of black and red light. Then he sighed. This is bad. Lord Go murmured helplessly. Suddenly, just as the beam of black and red light was about to approach Lord Go, the void in front of Lord Go was torn apart. A silhouette slowly walked out of it. He held a blue and white porcelain bowl in one hand, and his blue hair was fluttering in the wind. Chapter 1583. The heaven god that Lord Go had transformed into was very strong, but his strength was constantly weakening. After all, this was not his original strength. He had awakened the heaven god's aura and means by biting the heaven god's bone. This method naturally had its drawbacks. Sensing the beam of light filled with the power of sin that Soul 13 shot toward him, the stars in the sky seemed to explode under the impact of the beam. The power of this move was too terrifying. The figure that Lord Go had transformed into felt that he might be in trouble. However, of course, there were other situations as well. Buzz, the void was torn apart. In front of the beam of light, a figure appeared without anyone noticing. Clad in a striped red and white vermilion robe, his vigorous hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes shone like torches. In his hand was a steaming blue and white porcelain bowl, which no doubt contained delicious food. The appearance of such a figure in front of the figure that Lord Go had transformed into stunned everyone. Soul 13 raised his hand, in which the power of sin kept surging. Narrowing his eyes, he looked at Bufong, who stood in front of Lord Go, and twitched the corners of his mouth slightly. Reckless chef, you can die with that dog. The fact that a heaven god was weak was a pleasant surprise that he had never expected. If it was a heavenly deity at his peak, he could only turn around and run. He wouldn't be able to stay behind in the slightest. After all, a heaven god at his peak was not someone he could deal with now. Although he had become a soul overlord, every veteran heaven god was a veteran. How could they not have some tricks up their sleeves? However, the heaven god who had just appeared was not at his peak. In fact, with every minute and second that they fought, the heaven god's aura was weakening. Such a heaven god posed no threat to Soul 13 at all. Rumble. Soul 13 let out a long roar. It was an excited roar, and his tone contained his excitement and arrogance. A loud rumble rang out. The power of sin became even more powerful as it blasted out fiercely. The beam of light shot straight down and approached Bufong in an instant. Everything seemed to become quiet and slow at this moment. Bufong's expression was incomparably calm. Even when the sinful light beam approached his body, Bufong was not afraid at all. He did not even blink his eyes. His divine consciousness surged. Behind Bufong, the 5 supreme laws of the universe materialized into a wheel of law. Numerous discs floated and stacked behind him, and each law was like a star. The 5 stars shone resplendently, as if they were illuminating the heavens. Bufong's body was wrapped in a strange power. Bam! The beam of sin hit Bufong's body. As it approached Bufong's body, it collided with the power of the 5 supreme laws of the universe. 5 types of law energy and 1 type of sin energy. The power of laws was the power of this chaotic universe, while the power of sin was the power of the soul demon universe. The collision of 2 different powers produced a terrifying reaction. Boom! A dazzling light burst out from the point of collision. The light was as bright as day, and it was as if the whole universe had been illuminated at this moment. In the capital of the Shai divine dynasty, whether it was the fighting soul demons or the humans, they were all looking up at the sky in a daze. They could see the power that was seeping down from the starry sky. Their eyes were filled with only white. The pressure coming from their bodies belonged to soul overlords and heaven gods. The Shai divine emperor was dumbstruck. He had seen the last scene just now clearly. Bufong tore through space, appeared in front of the Lord Go, and helped the Lord Go block Soul 13's killing blow. Was it really so touching? Bufong sacrificed himself to block the attack for the Lord Go. How could Bufong, who is only a god, resist the power of sin? That was a confrontation of heaven god level powers. If a god were to intervene, he would probably be turned to ashes in an instant. There was no way he could block it. What Bufong did could only be described as touching. The Shai divine emperor's face twitched. Is Soul 13 really so strong? The aura of the Lord Go is indeed that of a heaven god, and he might be heaven god time. There might be some secret behind the disappearance of the current heaven god, and the Lord Go might be the reincarnation of heaven god time. However, a newly reincarnated heaven god needs time to recover his strength. The Lord Go is too weak. He looked up at the sky. The bright white light soon began to fade. The sky gradually turned gray. In the universe, everything became clear. Soul 13 narrowed his eyes. The third eye on his forehead kept twitching, exuding a terrifying aura. That chef should be dead, right? It's impossible for him to survive such an attack. He sacrificed himself to block the attack for a dog. This chef is really capable. He had planned to deal with the chef after devouring the heaven god, but now it seemed that he didn't need to. Soul 13 grinned and flapped the wings on his back. Then he focused his eyes. In the distance, the smoke and dust dissipated, revealing the scene there. With just a glance, Soul 13 felt a little incredulous. Bufong was not dead. He was standing where he was, unscathed. How is this possible? Soul 13 let out a shrill cry, feeling incredulous. Even the power of sin can't kill this chef? This is the power of sin from the 7 deadly sins. Bufong raised his head and exhaled a puff of white smoke. He was a little scared. Behind him, the 5 wheels of the supreme laws of the universe had disappeared, and he almost couldn't hold on any longer. Fortunately, he managed to block it. The main reason was that he had completed the advancement test. Bufong focused his eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Then, he met Soul 13's incredulous gaze. "I'll give you a bowl of noodles," Bufong said. The next moment, he flicked his finger. The divine fire snail noodle shot out and slowly sped towards Soul 13. A bowl of noodles? Everyone in the Shai divine dynasty saw the scene in the starry sky. They were clearly fighting, so how did it turn into a bowl of noodles? Everyone raised their heads and looked at it curiously. The blue and white porcelain bowl floated in the air. As it spun slowly, steam rose from the bowl, and a strange smell wafted out of it. It was a smell that could be described as stinky, but could also be described as fragrant. It was very unique and alluring. As long as one sniffed it, it seemed to arouse the primitive desire in the depths of one's heart, making one want to find out the source of the fragrance. The fragrance drifted and filled the air. It was as if the whole Shai divine dynasty was enveloped in it. Soul 13's ferocious face froze. He narrowed his eyes and took a deep sniff of the smell. "It smells so good," he murmured. All the soul demons in the Shai divine dynasty were intoxicated by the smell. Each of them greedily took a deep breath, trying to capture the smell. The faces of the humans in the Shai divine dynasty were a little strange. The fall of the soul demons had given them a short break. They were panting and had strange expressions on their faces. The Titan crown prince, bathed in blood, looked up at the sky and sniffed. The stench was not as strong as that of the stinky tofu, but it contained an indescribable meaning. It was also a stinky dish. It was also a stinky dish like the stinky tofu. The Titan disciple's pupils constricted, and then an excited smile came over the corners of his mouth. It seems that this dish was developed by Ownerbu to deal with the soul demons. Damn soul demons, your doomsday is here. To humans, it was a stinky smell. So many humans covered their noses. But to soul demons, it was a fragrance, and they sniffed greedily. Soul 13 was intoxicated by the fragrance. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. He found that a bowl of noodles was floating in front of him. It was a bowl of steaming noodles. The red chili oil looked incomparably bright, whetting one's appetite. Papillion steak, seasoning, and so on. It made the bowl of river snail rice noodles look very plump. It doesn't look good, but it smells so good. Looking at the bowl of river snail rice noodles, Soul 13's throat rolled up and down. The bowl of river snail rice noodles was like a gift from the devil, exuding temptation. His instinct as a soul overlord made it clear in his heart that he must refuse this bowl of river snail rice noodles. I can't eat it. I can't eat it even if I'm beaten to death. Once I eat it, I may be doomed eternally. I can't eat it. Soul 13's eyes were scarlet, and the eyeball on his forehead was blinking. Desire and greed flowed through them. The light of the dish illuminated the whole universe. I can't eat it. I can't eat it even if you beat me to death. I can't be tempted. Soul 13 clenched his teeth and frowned. In the distance, Bufong and Lord Go stood side by side. Both of them looked indifferently at Soul 13. Eat it. It's delicious. Bufong said lightly. Eat it. It's as delicious as sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go's magnetic voice rang through the starry sky. The voices of these two men were like the murmurs of demons, which instantly increased Soul 13's appetite. He was a gluttony soul overlord, and he could not control his appetite at all. He was so tempted by Bufong and Soul 13. He could not help it. Thud. He grabbed the bowl. I can't eat it. Soul 13's eyes widened, and they were bloodshot. Then, slurp, slurp, slurp. Soul 13's insect scales turned into chopsticks, picked up the rice noodles, and stuffed them into his mouth. The way he ate made him look like a starving ghost who had been starving for tens of thousands of years. As he ate, his eyes widened as if they were about to burst into tears. He did not want to eat it, but why was it so delicious? Was this a human delicacy? Why was it so delicious? It was so delicious that he could not stop eating it. When he took a bite, he felt the river snail rice noodles bouncing in his mouth. When he took a bite, the delicious soup burst out with a flame-like spiciness. When he took a bite, he felt as if flames were burning his body from the inside out. All these feelings came together. There was only one emotion left, and that was pleasure. Slurp. Soul 13 jerked the bowl up. In one gulp, he drank all the remaining soup in the bowl. Then, flames began to rise from the inside to the outside of Soul 13's body. The silver flames were burning his body. The scorching sensation made him realize that something was wrong. Sure enough, despicable human, there's something wrong with your bowl of noodles. Soul 13's heart was filled with rage. He stared fixedly at Bufong in the distance. Bufong and Lord Go stood side by side, the corners of their mouths curling upward at the same time. Although Lord Go's face could not be seen, one could see his excitement at the moment. Kill him while he's sick. Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Bufong nodded. A bowl of river snail rice noodles might not be able to kill Soul 13. After all, he was a heaven god level soul demon. However, just like stinky tofu could restrain a numbered soul demon, this river snail rice noodles should make Soul 13 feel uncomfortable as well. In that case, I'll take advantage of his discomfort and end the battle in one fell swoop. Bufong focused his eyes. With his hands clasped behind his back, his divine sense surged. Then there seemed to be a rumbling sound. The 5 wheels of law appeared behind him once again. In addition to the 5 wheels of law, the divine flame around Bufong began to jump. Wisps of the power of law floated in the air, turning Bufong's body into a sea of law. Bufong was like a supreme god in the sea of law. He stepped out of the sea on the waves. Congratulations to the host for completing the promotion test. The promotion will now begin. The system's serious voice rang out in Bufong's mind. Then, the corners of Bufong's mouth curled upward slightly. Looking at Soul 13, he took a step forward. As soon as he took that step, his aura began to rise as if it was boiling. Bufong took his time. He followed behind Lord Go. Step by step, he walked towards Soul 13 in the starry sky. His aura soared rapidly with every step he took. When Bufong approached the flaming Soul 13, his aura had reached a peak. He was an Emperor Realm God, Divine Emperor Bufong. Chapter 1584. Kill him while he's down. That was what the Lord Go and Bufong were thinking at the moment. Bufong walked forward step by step, following behind the Lord Go. His aura was soaring rapidly. In a flash, his strength and cultivation base, which were only at the level of a low-grade god, surged like boiling water. All of a sudden, it soared. The power of the laws swirled around him, rolling like an ocean. Contrasting with Bufong, Bufong looked like an ancient god, the master of the sea of laws. Stepping on the waves, he came. The scene stunned everyone. It was even more shocking than the appearance of a heaven god. Bufong's cultivation base had risen from the level of a new god to the level of a top-grade god emperor. The speed of his breakthrough was too exaggerated and frightening, beyond everyone's imagination. In fact, no one had ever seen such a breakthrough. Becoming a god emperor with a thought? This was simply a fantasy. Or was it so easy to become a god emperor? It must be remembered that god kings are the most supreme existences in this chaos verse, and their cultivation bases were incomparably high. They looked down on the world and controlled it, but that chef had achieved such strength with a thought. The shy divine emperor did not even care about his injuries as he jumped up from the ground. He did not expect that not only did Bufong survive Soul 13's attack, but his cultivation base had also broken through. He had forcibly broken through from a demigod to a god, and then from a god to a god emperor. Is this guy, is he really human? Is it because he has comprehended the 5 supreme laws of the universe? Can he do whatever he wants now that he has comprehended the 5 supreme laws? There was awe and fanaticism in the Titan Crown Prince's eyes. He was now a fanatical follower of Bufong. Only he knew how talented and powerful Bufong was. It was normal for anything strange to happen to Bufong. The fact that Bufong could bring him out of the kingdom full of soul demons alive was enough for him to trust him wholeheartedly. The Crown Prince was struck dumb. At this moment, he felt a deep sense of defeat. Bufong was really a monster. Compared to Bufong, he was nothing. The strongest Thearcha's disciple, the most talented Thearcha's disciple, everything was *T. The chef, whom she had once disdained, had now grown to the same realm as her father. Xiao Yinyu's eyes flickered, and her beautiful face was filled with an excited smile. She looked at Bufong, her expression a little blurred. Sure enough, no matter where Bufong was, he would shine like a piece of gold. IMO stood rooted to the ground, her body trembling, looking at the chef in the starry sky, who was emitting a mighty pressure. At this moment, she felt that her previous behavior really made her feel ashamed. The humans were dumbfounded, but soon after, everyone started to boil. They were excited and proud. The leader of the soul demons seemed to be at a disadvantage. The humans were saved. Bufong's aura skyrocketed. He felt that his divine power was gathering rapidly in his dantian. It was like the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop, but compared to it, his divine power was surging like a great river. However, at his current level, Bufang could clearly feel how terrifying the power contained in the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop was. It was a kind of power that transcended everything. It was so heavy that it seemed to be able to crush a part of the world. Even his divine power of the great river was not as good as that divine power liquid drop. Bufang also understood why the artifact spirits were so distressed when he crushed it. Bufang also felt that he was a little prodigal in the past. The divine power was transforming Bufang's body. Bufang could feel the surging power surging under his skin. It was as if he could blow up a star with a punch. This was the power of a divine emperor. At this moment, Bufang's fighting prowess had skyrocketed to a level that even he could not control. The figure of the Lord Go approached Soul 13 at high speed. Soul 13 had eaten the delicacy of snail rice noodles, which was a disaster for soul demons. Therefore, a silvery white flame burst out of Soul 13's body, burning him. Soul 13 held miserably. His sinful power kept surging as he tried to suppress the flames and his injuries. The Lord Go approached him. He threw out a punch. Under this punch, time seemed to slow down. Soul 13 naturally felt the Lord Go's attack. The Lord Go was a heaven god, and even he did not dare to take him lightly. Therefore, he divided some of his sinful power to resist the Lord Go's punch. Bam! Soul 13 threw out a punch and collided with the Lord Go's fist. Boom! Soul 13 was knocked flying backward and smashed into a vast star, causing the whole star to shake violently. He flipped to his feet, and the insect scales on his arm, which had collided with the Lord Go's fist, shattered. However, the insect scale armor that fell like sand and stones were slowly recovering. The Lord Go's eyes shone like torches. The law of time behind him sank and sped toward him. Bufang strode to catch up with him. The power of law kept gathering on Bufang's Taotai arm. He threw a punch at Soul 13. Get lost! Soul 13 focused his eyes and let out a ferocious roar. He really hated this chef to the core. That bowl of river snail rice noodles had caused his body to continuously break down and collapse. If it weren't for this chef, he would have completely flattened the Xiai divine dynasty and conquered this chaotic universe. He might even have been favored by all the soul demons and set foot on the peak of the soul demon realm. But now, he was like a dead dog and had fallen into such a state. It was all because of a bowl of snail rice noodles. That thing was poisonous. The Xiai divine emperor roared. His golden armor shone brightly. Then, he soared into the sky and charged into the soul demon's camp. With the divine emperor joining the battle instantly became one-sided. The human side had finally gained the upper hand. Half of the planet was blown up. The whole surface of the planet was full of craters. Soul 13 lay in a crater with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. His scarlet eyes stared unwillingly at the sky. In the distance, Lord Go and Bufang were still standing. The law of time on Lord Go was flickering as if it would disappear at any moment. Bufang, on the other hand, had his mouth open and was gasping for breath. Soul 13 was being attacked by the two of them. The insect scales on its body were completely shattered. It was unknown how many punches it had suffered. The speed at which the insect scales repaired could not even keep up with the speed at which they were destroyed. The pit was pitch black. Soul 13 moved. Rumble, his insect scales were completely shattered and rolled off like idiots, leaving only debris on them. He revealed his fleshly body, which was the fleshly body of the Titan Divine Emperor. It was covered with barbaric glyphs. I, Soul 13, can't lose here. I, Soul 13, am an existence who will become the master of this chaotic universe. I, Soul 13, will be recognized by the Soul God. I can't die here. Soul 13's body was trembling. The next moment, he opened his mouth wide. A bulge appeared on his neck. Soul 13's eyes looked as if they were about to burst. The bulge slowly moved upward and poured into his mouth from his neck. Blurred. He vomited. Soul 13 staggered back a step. A loud bang rang out. A black energy ball smashed to the ground. An incomparably terrible power was brewing in the black energy ball. A look of complete madness appeared on Soul 13's face. Damned human beings. Damned heaven gods. You'll soon regret what you've done. The soul overlords of the 7 great sins. How dare you look down on us like this? Soul 13 was extremely weak. The corners of his mouth were stained with juice, but the sneer on his face was as cold as ice. He took a step forward. Soul 13 soared into the sky and rushed out of the crater. Bufong and Lord Go narrowed their eyes and looked at Soul 13. Without the protection of his insect scales, Soul 13 was much thinner. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. The law of time around him had become much more illusory. But then he raised his hand and slapped out. It turned into a dog paw made of energy and slapped towards Soul 13. Bam! Soul 13 raised his arm a block. With a bang, green blood splattered everywhere. Although his fleshly body was that of a human, it was no longer human through the changes. He's very weak now, Lord Go said. He could sense that the paw was about to slam into him. It's time to end this, Bufong said. The 5 supreme laws of the universe gathered on his Taotai arm. Then, Bufong appeared in front of Soul 13 as if he had teleported. Soul 13 grinned and stared fixedly at Bufong. The look in his eyes seemed to want to devour Bufong alive. Bufong frowned. The god of cookings, I was activated. Buzz in Bufong's eye of cooking, he saw that Soul 13's body was now covered with little red dots. What's going on? He only had 3 weaknesses before, but now he's covered with them? How strange. However, Bufong was too lazy to think about it. The 5 supreme laws swept out and smashed his Taotai arm. Bam. Soul 13's fleshly body exploded in an instant. With a deafening rumble, the whole planet seemed to explode. You're dead. This chaotic universe will be destroyed. Soul 13 laughed cruelly. His eyes were full of resentment. Bam! The next moment, his resentful face froze. His fleshly body exploded completely, and green blood filled the sky like a blood mist. In the distance, the law of time around Lord Go dissipated and transformed back into the fat black dog. He transformed back into the form of a fat black dog. However, he was overcome with sleepiness, so he directly lay down on the ground full of ruins and slept soundly. Bufong glanced at Lord Go and twitched the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, Bufong paused. He seemed to sense that something was wrong. He turned his head and looked at the place where Soul 13 had exploded. Where's Soul 13's true form? Why didn't it show up? Bufong's pupils constricted as he murmured. In the deep pit, a crack rang out. A crack immediately appeared on the pitch-black sphere. The raging power of sin poured out of it. The next moment, an explosion rang out. The orb exploded. A savage beast shrouded in the power of sin with a huge mouth broke out of its shell. There was no longer any intelligence in the beast's eyes. Instead, there was only a terrifying intent to destroy. Raising its head, the savage beast let out a bestial roar. Its terrible aura soared into the sky. It was even stronger than Soul 13's. The real gluttony soul overlord had appeared. Chapter 1585. Before becoming a soul overlord, soul demons rarely had physical bodies. Most of them attached themselves to humans or savage beasts to reproduce and evolve. However, once a soul demon became a soul overlord, all the energy they had accumulated before would erupt in an instant. It would form the fleshly body of a soul demon, which was the true body of a soul overlord. However, Soul 13 had never wanted to expose this fleshly body, mainly because once it was exposed, his aura would leak out, and he would lose his mind and be completely trapped by the gluttony demon lord's will. All he knew was to eat, eat, and eat. This process would last for a long time, perhaps a year, or perhaps 10,000 years. Only with the accumulation of time could a berserk will regain its clarity. Of course, the main thing was that his aura would leak out, which was what Soul 13 did not want to see. Once it did, the soul overlords in the soul demon universe would be able to sense his aura. At that time, those soul overlords would do everything they could to come to this chaotic universe. By robbing him of his merits, he would have been able to win the soul god's favor. But now his merits had completely changed hands. After all, he was still very weak against a veteran top soul overlord. Roar! A terrible roar seemed to shake the whole universe. The starry sky was shaking, and the rivers of stars were rolling backward. Bufang's pupils constricted. Standing on the bumpy surface of the planet that had turned into ruins, he stared at the terrible savage beast that was slowly crawling out of a deep pit. Compared to Soul 13, this savage beast terrified him even more. Bufang felt as if all the pores on his body were constricting under the beast's gaze. He did not expect that after killing Soul 13, there would be an even more ferocious existence. The Lord Go was now in a deep sleep, so it was impossible for him to unleash the strength of a heaven god to help him again. Now he could only solve this big problem by himself. Rumble. The ferocious beast's body wasn't huge, but when it stepped on the ground would collapse and explode. Even the boiling magma in the depths of the planet's core seemed to be triggered and became violent. Magma continuously gushed out from the cracked ground. The terrible savage beast, shrouded in the pitch-black power of sin, stepped forward like a peerless, ferocious beast, bringing disaster with it. Boom! Pillars of magma rose into the sky one after another. That pitch-black, ominous beast opened its mouth, and a suction force seemed to exist in its mouth. The magma frantically drilled into the ominous beast's mouth. "What is this?" Bufang frowned. With a stomp of his foot, his body seemed to have teleported, and in the blink of an eye, he was far away. He grabbed Lord Go's body and threw the sleeping Lord Go into the heaven and earth farmland. Then he soared into the sky. The ferocious beast did not chase after Bufang. Instead, it opened its mouth wide and sucked the lava that burst out from the star core. That was scorching lava. Even god kings would not be able to endure the heat of the lava. But this vicious beast was eating happily as if it was drinking water. This scene was shocking. The pitch-black sinful energy wrapped around the planet, seemingly corroding it. Bang, bang, bang. There was only a limited amount of lava, and it was sucked into the beast's mouth. Meanwhile, the planet's ground cracked, and pieces of the earth crumbled and flew into the air as the beast devoured them. A savage beast that could devour stars. No wonder it was called Gluttony Soul Overlord. Hovering in the starry sky, Bufang was also a little dumbfounded as he watched. Suddenly, Bufang seemed to sense something. He jerked his head up and looked into the depths of the starry sky. Because of the Gluttony Soul Overlord's aura, Bufang felt as if there were existences spying on him from afar in the depths of the starry sky. Their eyes were filled with brutality and bloodlust. In fact, the look in their eyes was exactly the same as the Gluttony Soul Overlord's. Bufang's heart sank. An unparalleled pressure almost suffocated him. The 7 sins. Could it be that those spying on him are the soul demon universe that Soul 13 was born in? Bufang sucked in a cold breath. As soon as the idea came to his mind, he felt a little terrified. Soul 13 had just become a soul overlord, but he was already so powerful and invincible. If the veteran soul overlords of the soul demon universe passed through the cosmic barrier and appeared in this world, that would be a real disaster for this world. In this universe, the modern-day heaven gods did not show up, and even if they did, they might not be a match for those veteran soul overlords. Not to mention, Bufang had guessed from Soul 13 that there was a soul god who was even more powerful than the soul overlord. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. It was as if he could not stop his heart from trembling at the thought of this name. The spying in the depths of the universe came and went quickly, as if it did not want to arouse anyone's vigilance. So it had stopped. Bufang exhaled, turned his head, and looked into the distance. There, the Gluttony Soul Overlord had swallowed the whole planet, but his body did not show any signs of growing bigger. However, his body did not show any signs of growing bigger. His tiny body had eaten an entire planet, yet he did not feel bloated at all. His stomach was made of iron. Buzz, suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord raised his head. His scarlet eyes were filled with violence and ferocity as he fixed them on Buffon. Or rather, they were fixed on the Shai divine dynasty behind Buffon. To the soul demons, the humans in the divine dynasty were tantamount to delicious food. The gluttony soul overlord could not help but drool. Swoosh! The wings on his back spread. Then he flapped them. Like a beam of black light, he swept across the sky in a flash and pressed down on the Shai divine dynasty. In the Shai divine dynasty, the humans, who had suppressed the soul demons, shuddered. Everyone felt a terrible aura looming over their heads. Subconsciously, they looked up. Then they saw the monster with the big mouth that seemed to have become the center of the starry sky. What's that? What a terrible aura. I feel the aura of death, gulp. This aura is even stronger than Soul 13's. The human expert's expressions changed dramatically. The Shai divine emperor felt a chill run down his spine. Wasn't Soul 13 killed? How could there still be such a terrible soul demon? You stood on the top of the Luo family's skyscraper, frowning. The gluttony soul overlord hovered over the capital, his nose twitching. His huge mouth was like a bottomless pit. Suddenly, his scarlet eyes turned and rested on the Luo family's skyscraper. There he was standing. The gluttony soul overlord's first target was actually Nethery. No one had expected this. Roar. Gluttony soul overlord's roar shook the whole capital of the Shai divine dynasty. Slash. Suddenly, a tongue shot out of the soul overlord's mouth like a bolt of lightning. Then, it sped toward you. Its speed was extremely fast. You felt cold all over. Being targeted by the soul overlord, she could not even move her body. An aura of death suddenly approached. The gluttony soul overlord's eyes gleamed with greed. He had lost his rationality now, and all that was left was his will, which was dominated by gluttony, one of the 7 sins. He wanted to eat all over the universe, rumble. Just as the tongue was about to pierce Yu's head, Bufong's figure suddenly appeared. He raised his Taotai arm and grabbed the tongue. One end of the tongue was in Bufong's hand, and the other end was in the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. The soul overlord rolled his eyes, then began to pull the tongue back. Bufong could not resist the great force pulling him, so he was pulled toward the gluttony soul overlord's mouth by the tongue. The gluttony soul overlord did not care who was in his way. He would eat them all. The humans turned pale. Now, Bufong was their only hope. If even Bufong was eaten, no one would be able to stop the gluttony soul overlord. Bufong fixed his eyes on the gluttony soul overlord. Looking at the soul overlord's flesh trembling, he raised his eyebrows. I wonder how this soul overlord's flesh is like. I wonder if it's better than dragon meat. Bufong murmured. However, when his murmur was heard by the crowd, it caused an uproar. Why is he still thinking about ingredients at a time like this? This gluttony soul overlord is stronger than Soul 13. Without Lord Go, only Bufong could stop him. Gluttony soul overlord's mouth was wide open, and inside it were rows of sharp teeth. They could chew through everything in heaven and earth. Once Bufong fell in his mouth, he would be completely crushed. The god of cooking's eye. Bufong's eyes burst into golden light as he looked over. He wanted to find the soul overlord's weakness. Oh! However, after activating the god of cooking's eye, Bufong found that this soul overlord had even fewer weaknesses than Soul 13. He only had 2 weaknesses, and neither of them was outside his body, but inside his body. What should he do? Since he could not attack him from the outside, Bufong did not know how to deal with this soul overlord. Buzz, the 5 supreme laws of the universe gathered on his Taotai. Arm Bufong's fist fell from the sky like a burning silver divine flame. Boom! The fist bypassed gluttony soul overlord's mouth and hit his chin. The blow, which contained the 5 supreme laws of the universe, threw the soul overlord into the air. However, it did not penetrate the soul overlord's chin. Rolling his eyes, the soul overlord locked onto Bufong's body again. A ripping sound rang out. Suddenly, the soul overlord's tail swept over. Bufong frowned. The black turtle constellation Wok floated up to his side. Dong! A loud noise rang out. The black turtle constellation Wok was smashed onto Bufong's body. It knocked Bufong flying backward and smashed him hard on the ground in the distance. He rolled on the ground for a few times. Shaking his vermilion robe, Bufong looked up at the soul overlord. The weakness is inside. If that's the case, a thought flashed through Bufong's mind. The black turtle constellation Wok, the white tiger heaven stove, and the god of cooking set appeared. He began to cook on the spot. Flames surged, and steam rose to the sky. Before long, a bowl of divine fire snail rice noodles was formed. Of course, one bowl of divine fire snail rice noodles was not enough. Bufong also took out the perishing pot and the death sword pot. Then he put stinky tofu in both pots. The stench was overwhelming, but it was a fatal temptation to soul demons. Since he was going to attack from the inside, he would let this gluttony soul overlord have the pleasure of having an exploding appetite. Bufong kicked the ground with the tip of his foot and soared into the sky in an instant, hovering in midair. Around his body, the divine fire snail rice noodles, the perishing pot of stinky tofu, and the death sword pot of stinky tofu were hovering in midair. The gluttony soul overlord's scarlet eyes turned and fixed on Bufong. Or rather, his gaze was fixed on the 3 dishes hovering around Bufong. The stench was overwhelming, but to him, it was a fatal temptation. Roar! The gluttony soul overlord roared. The muscles in his mouth were twitching, and a powerful suction force exploded out. The hem of Bufong's vermilion robe fluttered toward the spot where the soul overlord was sucking. He flicked his finger. The 3 dishes shot out like streams of light and rushed toward the soul overlord at the same time. The soul overlord did not refuse any of them. Bufong opened his mouth wide. The divine fire snail rice noodles were the first to enter his stomach. Then, the stinky tofu, the perishing pot, and the death sword pot were devoured as well. He breathed a sigh of relief. Bufong's divine sense surged, and his eyes narrowed. If you want to eat, eat more. As soon as he said that, Bufong raised his hand and pointed at the soul overlord. His lips parted slightly. Explode. Chapter 1586. Facing the gluttony soul overlord, whose only weakness was his stomach, Bufong chose to attack from the inside. Perhaps an internal explosion could cause some damage to the soul overlord, but it would not be easy to break it from the outside. After all, the gluttony soul overlord was a soul overlord on the same level as a heaven god. It would not be easy for Bufong to break his defense. Bufong raised his hand, opened his mouth, and spat out an explosion. The gluttony soul overlord swallowed the divine fire snail rice powder, the perishing pot, and the death sword pot. These 3 dishes were not only delicious, but their destructive power was also unparalleled. As Bufong's strength improved, so did the power of the perishing pot and the death sword pot. The explosion was so powerful that it could even shatter a star. Boom! A muffled rumble rang out, as if it came from the depths of the universe. Suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord's stomach shook violently and swelled up completely, becoming very huge in an instant, and kept expanding. Then, it began to distort and burst. Everyone raised their heads and looked at this scene in disbelief. Now, they could only pin their hopes on Bufong. Perhaps Bufong could fight the gluttony soul overlord. After all, Bufong had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. With him, anything was possible. Many people clenched their fists. They were hoping that the explosion could kill the huge gluttony soul overlord, even though he was a heaven god. But soon they were disappointed. The gluttony soul overlord did not explode. Even an explosion of that magnitude only made him squirm a little uncomfortably. A gluttony soul overlord who could devour heaven and earth and even an entire star, was not so easy to deal with. Burp! In the sky, the gluttony soul overlord's body was constantly recovering. He opened his mouth and let out a burp. Amidst the burp, there was a stench and the smoke from the explosion. Bufong stood in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back. He did not expect that such a trick could not hurt the soul overlord at all. It was enough to show how strong the soul overlord's defense was and how tough his flesh was. Bufong also had a headache. Gluttony soul overlord's teeth gleamed with sharpness, while the soul demons cheered. Spirit overlords were indeed invincible. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's tongue shot out again toward Bufong and you. To gluttony soul overlord, Yu's cursed body is as good as divine flame snail rice noodles. As for Bufong, he was ignored. To him, Bufong was no different from an ordinary human ingredient. His target is still you. The sharp tongue was like an arrow piercing through the air, constantly piercing through the void and causing it to explode. This power was extremely terrifying. How should he deal with this gluttony soul overlord? Bufong felt a headache coming on, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows. He had used all kinds of tricks, but none of them seemed to be effective against the gluttony soul overlord, who had thick skin and flesh. If he allowed this beast to continue wreaking havoc, the whole chaotic universe would be thrown into chaos. Facing the tongue that was shooting toward you, Bufong once again reached out his Taotai arm and grabbed it. The dragon bone kitchen knife rolled up. Then he slashed it down. However, when it hit the tongue, it only produced a clanging sound as if it had hit a sharp metal. A ripping sound rang out. The tongue lashed out. Boom! The tongue that streaked across the ground left a deep pit in the ground. Its power was extremely terrifying. In the sky, the gluttony soul overlord was roaring. He seemed a little angry because he had been stopped from tasting delicious food again and again. Roar! He opened his mouth full of sharp teeth and let out a roar. Blasts of air blasted out and kept gushing out. Then his scarlet eyes seemed to be surging with killing intent. His body bobbed up and down as if he was about to swoop down. Bufong breathed a sigh of relief. The 5 supreme laws of the universe swirled around him and gathered in his arm. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the gluttony soul overlord, threw out a punch, and hit him hard on the chin. The punch sent the soul overlord flying. However, this kind of attack did not hurt the gluttony soul overlord at all. It only angered the soul overlord even more. Bufong felt a headache coming on. Even the dragon bone kitchen knife could not break the gluttony soul overlord's defense. Bufong did not know what to do. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's tail lashed out. Bufong raised his hand to block it. With a rumble, he was sent flying backward. The air was compressed, and he smashed hard into the ground. The impact created a huge pit in the ground. The gluttony soul overlord was too strong. The force of his tail was enough to smash a god emperor. The faces of the humans turned pale. What should they do? How could they block it? Crash, rubble rolled down. Bufong got up from the rubble, shook his body, and shook off the dust on him. Bufong grabbed the Qilin transmigration ladle at his waist. Buzz, he calmed his mind and sank into his spirit sea. Inside Bufong's spirit sea, the god of cooking's menu floated quietly, and the true form of his divine sense sat cross-legged on it. In the vast spirit sea, the huge Qilin lay in it. As if sensing Bufong's arrival, the Qilin opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his lantern-like eyes stared at Bufong. "You came here to possess me, didn't you?" he asked. It was as if he could see through Bufong's mind. In fact, in addition to crushing the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop, Bufong still had the Qilin as his trump card. The Qilin was a perfected artifact spirit. His strength was unfathomable. Once he possessed him, with Bufong's current strength, the fighting prowess he could unleash should be doubled. It should not be a problem for him to deal with that gluttony soul overlord. Bufong nodded expressionlessly. In fact, possessing someone is not a good technique. It has too many limitations, and I can't really unleash my strength. So, under normal circumstances, I don't like possessing someone. The Chelan shook his head. However, the Chelan suddenly stood up. His body was so huge that it seemed to blot out the sky. But I can smell a tempting smell from that big guy outside. So I agree, he said. As soon as his voice rang out, he raised his paw. The huge claw let out a rumbling sound as it swatted at Bufang. Finally, he gently touched Bufang's forehead. But as he stood up from the rubble, the look in Bufang's eyes changed in an instant. Then, Bufang's hair changed as well, turning from black to purple. He shook his head, and his hair fluttered. The corners of purple-haired Bufang's mouth curved upward in an evil smile. He raised his hand, looked at his palm, and twisted his neck. It's been a long time since I experienced this feeling of possessing someone. It's really wonderful, said purple-haired Bufang. Roar. In the sky, the gluttony soul overlord seemed to be provoked by Bufang. At this moment, he fixed his eyes on Bufang and let out a furious roar. Although he lacked consciousness and intelligence, his strength and fighting instinct were enough to crush everything. This was the horror of soul demons. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord took the initiative. His body was not very large, and it seemed inconvenient for him to move. But when he moved, he appeared in front of purple-haired Bufang like a bolt of lightning. Then he slapped down with his paw. He wanted to completely flatten purple-haired Bufang. I can feel it. The delicious smell emanating from the depths of your soul intoxicates me, purple-haired Bufang said, grinning. The next moment, he raised a palm. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's paw collided with Bufang's palm. The entire ground caved in again, and gravel flew everywhere. However, the purple-haired Bufang was hovering in place, motionless. The gluttony soul overlord's attack did not even push him back. This scene caused everyone to be shocked. I, Chelan, love to win people over with virtue. If you smile, I'll spare your life. Purple-haired Bufang tilted his head and said. He was in a good mood after coming out to make a name for himself. Roar. The gluttony soul lord opened his mouth and roared. Then, he opened his mouth wide, aiming to bite the purple-haired Bufang. Purple-haired Bufang shook his head and sighed regretfully. He held a ladle in his hand. Holding it with one hand, he smashed it toward the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. Bang! It was an accurate blow, and it smashed hard on gluttony soul overlord's chin. The gluttony soul overlord was struck dumb. His body flew high into the air, and in a flash, he soared into the starry sky. The strength of the ladle was somewhat unexpected. His fingers danced. The Chelan transmigration ladle spun in purple-haired Bufang's hand. 18 Chelan transmigration ladles. Purple-haired Bufang said. Then a terrible aura spread from his body. Like an ancient bestial roar, Bufang's figure soared into the starry sky. The shadow of a huge ladle emerged behind him. Holding the ladle, the purple-haired Bufang smashed it toward the gluttony soul overlord in the distance. Every time the ladle hit, the gluttony soul overlord howled miserably. The soul overlord was so angry that he wanted to swallow the ladle. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, the ladle was shoved into his mouth, breaking a few of his teeth. Bang! 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 Every time the purple-haired Bufang smashed the ladle, the gluttony soul overlord was a little dumbfounded. The Chelan transmigration ladle seemed to have some magical power. Whenever it hit his body, his indestructible, fleshly body seemed to be in severe pain. One ladle after another, the gluttony soul overlord, like a raging lion, was smashed into a docile kitten. He lay in the starry sky, not daring to move. This thing's skin is really rough and thick, purple-haired Bufang murmured, frowning. He held the ladle in his hand. Suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord, who was lying in the starry sky, leaped up. His mouth kept growing bigger and bigger, as if it could swallow the whole starry sky in an instant. Purple-haired Bufang turned his head in confusion, and in a flash, he was enveloped by the huge mouth. Just like that, Bufang was swallowed. Everyone was stunned. Yu's pupils constricted. The shy, divine emperor shuddered. What's going on? Is Bufong eaten? Among the humans, many people let out cries of alarm and wails. How did Bufong get eaten? That's the gluttony soul overlord. How could he survive after being eaten? The soul demons, on the other hand, were so excited that they were all shouting, "That damned chef is finally eaten." Without that troublesome chef, the soul demons would surely win the battle. The war was about to come to an end. The gluttony soul overlord seemed to be very happy after eating Bufong. He roared in the starry sky to show his might. He even wanted to completely crush Bufong. The gluttony soul overlord was still shooting through the starry sky. He smashed many stars and forcefully swallowed them into his mouth, swallowing them one bite at a time. Everyone was in despair. It was all over. But was it really over? The gluttony soul overlord stretched out his long tongue. The ferocious look in his eyes soared. Then it shot out and sped toward you. Without this annoying guy to disturb him, he could finally have a good meal. However, just as the tongue was about to touch you, the gluttony soul overlord's eyes went wide. His tongue also stiffened in the air. A faint voice rang out from his stomach. Chapter 1587. You're very naughty. I can't believe you actually ate me. A faint voice rang out of the gluttony soul overlord's belly and soon resounded through the starry sky. Everyone was taken aback. Bufong was not dead. He was eaten by the gluttony soul overlord, and he was still alive? The gluttony soul overlord's tongue, which was reaching toward you, froze as if he had been petrified. His eyes rolled, and then the light in his eyes grew even brighter. Bam! The sound of something knocking on his stomach rang out. The gluttony soul overlord let out a miserable howl. In the eyes of the crowd, gluttony soul overlord's body kept bulging in irregular shapes as if someone was about to break out of his stomach. It was Bufong. It was definitely Bufong. A look of hope came over the shy, divine emperor's face. Just when he thought Bufong was killed and everything was about to end, Bufong had once again created a miracle for him. This miraculous chef had broken everyone's understanding time and time again. The gluttony soul overlord's body kept twisting in midair. Perhaps even he himself did not know that his weakness existed within his body. He thought that by swallowing Bufong with pride, he was speeding up his own death. Bufong, who was possessed by Qilin, was even more skillful in dealing with him. Swish! The gluttony soul overlord opened his mouth and spat out a pitch-black liquid. However, as the liquid splattered across the starry sky, Bufong's body did not appear. It seemed that Bufong was stuck in his stomach and would not leave. The gluttony soul overlord panicked a little. He reached out a hand and tried to dig Bufong out of the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. His sharp claws went deep into the gluttony soul overlord's stomach, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not dig Bufong out. Rumble! His back bulged once again, but this time there were cracks all over it. The scene was horrifying to the gluttony soul overlord. He kept roaring and struggling in the void. His body streaked across the vast sky, constantly crashing into the stars and shattering them. The entire starry sky seemed to be in chaos at this moment. The soul demons were struck dumb, and they suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Was the gluttony soul overlord about to die? Once gluttony soul overlord was killed, none of them would be able to leave. The great land that they had conquered would be returned to these humans, to them. This was something unimaginable. To them, these humans were delicious food. Once the soul overlord failed, the food would leave them. It was an indescribable pain. Bang! Gluttony soul overlord smashed viciously into a star, which cracked and cracked. The gluttony soul overlord stopped moving. His back was torn open. A cracking sound rang out. Then with a bang it exploded. His weakness had been attacked from the inside by Bufong and torn apart. Pitch-black sinful energy gushed out of him. At this moment, this peerless ferocious beast was on the verge of death. It was like a deflated balloon, deflating in an instant. His ferocity, violence, and insufferably arrogance, all of them disappeared completely at this moment. Rip! His back split open. A figure slowly walked out of it. Bufong's body was untainted by even a speck of dust. His purple hair fluttered, his eyes were evil, and the corners of his mouth were slightly curved upward. The gluttony soul overlord's choice to devour him was simply the worst decision. Gluttony soul overlord's aura was weak. His weakness was exposed, and his true form was affected. Originally, even if his fleshly body was completely crushed, he could still be reborn from a single drop of blood. But now that his weakness was exposed, it affected his soul. He could not even be reborn from a single drop of blood. It was as if the connection between this fleshly body and his true form had been completely cut off. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Roar. The gluttony soul overlord opened his mouth and wanted to roar again. Purple-haired Bufong raised his hand and knocked the soul overlord on the head. He knocked the gluttony soul overlord to the ground. Ugh, if little host hadn't taken a fancy to your flesh, I would have smashed you with a spoon. Purple-haired Bufong glanced at the soul overlord, who had fallen to the ground and was motionless. Purple-haired Bufong also had a look of excitement in his eyes. Buzz suddenly, a wisp of black smoke began to spread from the soul overlord's body. In the next moment, it turned into a human figure. It was Soul 13's true form, which was shrouded in smoke and could not be seen clearly. But Bufong could feel that it was Soul 13's true form. Finally, this fellow's soul demon true form was revealed. Purple-haired Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth. All of a sudden, Bufong's purple hair changed color, returning to its original black color. Roar! Behind Bufong, a behemoth rushed up with a rumble. It was a purple Qilin, huge, majestic, and filled with a terrible oppressive aura. After Soul 13's true form left the gluttony soul overlord's body, he regained his consciousness. He looked around blankly. What he saw was the Qilin's lantern-like eyes and Bufong's expressionless face. Everything around him, including the broken stars and the crumbling starry sky. Down below, the human experts and soul demons were staring at him with their mouths wide open. Soul 13's heart sank. He saw his own lifeless body. Damn it! Did I fail? How is this possible? I've exposed my hidden body, which will destroy and devour everything once it's out. Soul 13 had been waiting for the day he regained his consciousness. But, to his surprise, he had regained his consciousness so quickly. Unfortunately, all he had left was his true form. The Qilin's nose twitched, then he opened his mouth, from which saliva trickled down. His saliva dripped down in droplets. Although the saliva was invisible, Bufong could not help but glance at the Qilin. Almighty One, be more reserved. Bufong said, You'll scare me like this. The Qilin smacked his lips and then burst out laughing. The familiar, demonic laughter made the corner of Bufong's mouth twitch. Soul 13 sensed the aura of death from the Qilin. It was the natural reaction of a prey. He gave Bufong a deep look, then turned around and fled without hesitation. As long as there was life, there was hope. As long as his true form still existed, he could continue to possess others and be reborn. At that time, he would be a soul overlord who could destroy heaven and earth. So he was not willing to die like this. As a soul overlord, he did not think Bufong could stop him if he wanted to escape. Although Bufong was bizarre, he was only a god emperor. He had not become a heaven god yet, so he thought he could escape. Even if he could not defeat Bufong, he could still run away. If that were the case, he would be too aggrieved as a soul overlord. Rumble. A pitch-black aura of sin filled the air. Without hesitation, Soul 13 turned and flew toward the depths of the starry sky. You want to leave? The Qilin's eyes narrowed. His saliva kept dripping from his mouth. He raised his hoof. The next moment, he slapped at the void. The hoof seemed to pierce through the void, and when it reappeared, it was right above Soul 13's head. It smashed down with a thud. Soul 13's fleeing body froze in an instant. It was as if an electric current had run through him. The fear in his heart grew stronger. Damn it! Damn it! What kind of existence is this? Soul 13 came to his senses and tried to flee like a madman. He did not want to stay in this place for a moment longer. However, he really cannot escape this time. After the hoof, the Chelan came to Chelan's claw. The claw fell, grabbed Soul 13's neck, and lifted him up to the Chelan. The Chelan's eyes flashed, and he seemed a little excited. His long whiskers curled slightly, fell on Soul 13's face, and gently stroked it. Soul 13 was about to cry. He found that the savage beast in front of him was looking at him as if he was a delicious dish. Is it really so terrifying? Could it be that this ferocious beast was really going to eat him? He was a soul overlord. A soul overlord who stood at the top of the chaotic universe. How could he be eaten? How was this possible? Before Soul 13 could finish his thought, the Chelan opened his mouth and stuffed Soul 13 into it, bit by bit, until he was completely stuffed. Then, he closed his mouth and chewed for a while. Soul 13's true form was swallowed by the Chelan. Bufong stared blankly at the scene. This big boss is indeed a big boss. No wonder all the other artifact spirits call him Big Boss. His ferocious appearance is well-deserved. The Chelan burped. Then, he exchanged a look with Bufong and seemed somewhat satisfied. Then, he turned into a beam of purple light and returned to Bufong's spirit sea. As for Soul 13, he had become a thing of the past. In the Xiai divine dynasty, everyone stared blankly at what was happening in the starry sky. The scene completely stunned them, and they didn't know what to say. That was a soul overlord, the supreme soul overlord, an existence comparable to a heaven god, was swallowed just like that. Although it was ferocious, why did everyone feel inexplicably refreshed? On the soul demon side, all the soul demons were chilled. Knowing that they had lost the battle, the numbered soul demons turned and fled without hesitation. It would be best if they could escape. As long as they survived, they would have a chance to make a comeback. The soul demons' reproduction speed was very fast, and as long as they had enough flesh and blood, it would not slow down. The retreat of the soul demons attracted the humans' attention. The Xiai Divine Emperor's eyes turned red. You want to run? Don't even think about it. Everyone, come with me. Kill him. The Divine Emperor bellowed. The golden armor on his body grew brighter and brighter. Then, he soared into the sky and rushed into the soul demons' camp. The soul demons, who had lost their fighting spirit, were nothing to be afraid of. The humans were in high spirits and full of fighting spirit. The Xiai Crown Prince's energy soared into the sky. The Titan Crown Prince roared loudly, venting the excitement and sorrow in his heart. Imo and Xiao Yinyu also joined the battle. For a moment, the humans sounded the horn of a counterattack. The Chelan had returned. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong stood on the broken star. In front of him was the corpse of the gluttony soul overlord. Or rather, it was a heaven god level ingredient. Of course, the premise was that Bufong had to consider whether it was edible or not. The fleshly body of a soul overlord was the condensation of essence. Not only did it have superb defense, but its energy content was also extraordinary. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in Bufong's hand. Holding the knife, Bufong cut off a piece of meat from the gluttony soul overlord's thigh. Because it had lost its true form, the fleshly body's defense was greatly weakened, so Bufong could easily cut it off. Looking carefully at the piece of meat, Bufong found that it was somewhat similar to the flesh of a squid. Apart from the hard outer shell, the tender meat inside was similar to that of a squid. Of course, the energy content was naturally incomparable. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Bufong put away the meat. As for the soul overlord's body, Bufong put it into the system's storage space. Bufong did not put it into the heaven and earth farmland because he was afraid that something would happen to the soul overlord's body. Of course, the most important thing was that as his strength improved, the heaven and earth farmland was also undergoing earth-shaking changes. This change would last for a while. Bufong exhaled deeply. Standing on the broken star, Bufong looked up at the shy, divine dynasty, which was covered in smoke. The corner of his mouth curved upward. The calamity of the soul demons is finally over. Now that this was over, it was time for Bufong to start preparing to find the artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets. Moreover, Bufong had an intuition that it would not be easy to find the artifact spirits first. Moreover, the throbbing in the depths of Bufong's soul told him that the real test to become the god of cooking was about to begin. In the chaotic universe, the void was torn apart. A wisp of black gas that looked like a little snake emerged. Then it transformed into an ethereal and weak figure. If Bufong were here, he would definitely recognize that the aura of this little snake was that of Soul 13's clone. Damn, chef, do you really think you've killed me, Soul 13? I bet you never thought that I still have clone. The little black snake turned into Soul 13's figure, hissing bitterly. After losing his true form, he did not know how long it would take for him to become a soul overlord again with this clone. However, with his previous experience, he believed that he could become a soul overlord again. Buzz Soul 13 turned, trying to hide and grow wretchedly. Suddenly, a chuckle rang out. I've finally found you. A ripping sound rang out. The void was torn apart. A hand fell and grabbed the little snake that was Soul 13's clone. Soul 13 froze. In front of him, a figure whose head was shrouded in a hazy mist emerged. You've made me look for you. You can't run away this time, can you? Chapter 1588. The gluttony soul overlord had fallen. All the beautiful fantasies the soul demons had dreamed of had disappeared like bubbles. Humans fought back in desperation, clenching the weapons in their hands, shouting and roaring as they chased after the soul demons with hatred. This was a war against a common enemy. They had finally seized the initiative in the war, so they had to fight back and kill the soul demons in one fell swoop. They would not give them any chance to fight back. Bufong returned from the ruined planet and landed on the Luo family skyscraper. The morning sun rose from the horizon, casting a dazzling light on Bufong. The people who stayed behind in the shy divine dynasty were looking at him with respect and fanaticism. Even though he was just a chef, he was a chef who had saved the world. He was a chef who deserved everyone's respect. At some point, he was standing quietly behind Bufong. This battle had completely spread Bufong's name. Perhaps from now on, no one in this chaotic universe would not know the name of Bufong. He was a chef who was comparable to a heaven god. It's finally over. Bufong opened his mouth and yawned. A sense of exhaustion swept over him. This time, he was indeed exhausted. Whether it was the urgent breakthrough or the promotion test, he had been in a state of tension. It was not until this moment that he finally relaxed. The entire skyscraper was swaying precariously as if it would collapse at any moment. However, with the system around, this building should not collapse. After all, the restaurant was still on it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong stepped into the restaurant. He pulled out a chair and sat down. He needed a good rest to calm his emotions. The catastrophe of the soul demons, which had swept across the entire chaotic universe, had indeed woken many people up. Although the catastrophe was over, there were still many questions that Bufong needed to think about. Of course, after the catastrophe, Bufong's strength had also stepped into another level. If he wanted to break through to the heaven god realm, he needed more turnover. Therefore, it was necessary for the restaurant to be open. Apart from that, Bufong also needed to find a way to awaken the artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets. In other words, he had to enter the place where the artifact spirits were sleeping. That place was very mysterious. At least until now, Bufong had not figured out. Was it in some corner of the chaos-verse? Or was it in some great world? Since it was the sleeping place of the god of cooking sets artifact spirit, it should not be some remote place. After all, an artifact spirit also wanted face. The Lord Go's true identity was actually a heavenly god, the heavenly god of time. This was something that Bufong had not expected. However, the current Lord Go had not yet recovered to his peak. He did not even have a tenth of his heavenly God strength. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so difficult to deal with Soul 13. Even Soul 13 was attacking the Chaos Verse with such reckless abandon. If not for Bufong's breakthrough and the Qilin's possession, the final outcome was really hard to predict. Here comes the problem. Where did all the heavenly gods go? Heavenly God time was the Lord Go, so it was understandable that he had not yet recovered to his peak. Could it be that the other heavenly gods had been reincarnated for some reason, just like the Lord Go? In that case, which heavenly god was the one who attacked him during his heaven god tribulation? Bufong narrowed his eyes. His mind was spinning. He was thinking about the problem. Bufong knew very well that there were still heavenly gods in the Chaos Verse who had not fallen into the reincarnation cycle, like the Lord Go. But why did the heavenly god not attack him during the calamity of the soul demons? Instead, he slapped him when he used the divine flame to devour the law. Did he bully the weak and fear the strong? Did he think that Bufong was a pushover? Bufong stroked his chin. With a thought in his mind, he brought the Lord Go out of the heaven and earth farmland. Oh, Bufong paused for a moment because he brought out a familiar little figure. Xiaopi. The mantis shrimp rolled its eyes. Lying on the Lord Go's head, he seemed to be giggling. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched slightly. Ever since this little fellow went into the heaven and earth farmland, there had been no news of him. He did not expect that he would come out now. Xiaopi landed on Bufong's shoulder, his numerous legs crawling around. The Lord Go lay under the path understanding tree, sleeping soundly. The previous battle might have consumed all the energy he had accumulated. Bufong, I'm hungry. You sat not far from Bufong, looking at him eagerly. Bufong paused. He nodded, rose to his feet, and was about to step into the kitchen. Bufong, young man, I am hungry too. Hades' era followed Yu's example, looking eagerly at Bufong. Give I a spicy strip, and I will be satisfied. When Bufong turned his head, Hades' era said hurriedly. Looking at Hades' era with an expressionless face, Bufong's mouth rose coldly, as if he was sneering. That sneer made Nether King Air Ha's whole body shiver. Now, Bufong young man's wings had hardened, and he even dared to sneer at him. Bufong went into the kitchen, washing the vegetables and the utensils. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. He liked this kind of atmosphere and style. He took out the dragon blood rice and began to cook it. However, after cooking the dragon blood rice, Bufong was not in a hurry to take it out. Instead, he took out the soul overlord meat. It was a piece of meat cut from the gluttony soul overlord's thigh. The shell of the meat was very hard. With the dragon bone kitchen knife, Bufong carefully separated the shell from the meat. Thud! A soft piece of meat was thrown on the chopping board. The texture and lines on the meat were very neat and clear. Bufong reached out his hand, pressed it, and felt the clear rebound of the meat. Bufong's curiosity was aroused. He twirled the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, creating a knife light. Holding the knife, Bufong stuck out 3 fingers of his other hand and placed them on the meat. The dragon bone kitchen knife cut it horizontally, cutting the meat into hundreds of layers. Every single layer was a thin piece. This was a test of his knife skills, but with Bufong's current knife skills, it was very natural for him to do all this, even though it was soul overlord meat. After cutting it, Bufong thought for a while, as if thinking about how to cook it. Originally, Bufong planned to throw it into the wok and fry it, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was not appropriate. Suddenly, Bufong's eyes lit up. He took the black turtle constellation wok. Without heating it, he directly put the gluttony soul overlord meat into the wok. He held out his index finger. Buzz, a silver divine flame suddenly sprang out of Bufong's hand. The silver divine flame kept jumping. However, this was not what Bufong wanted. His divine sense surged, controlling the divine flame. Whoosh! The next moment, the divine flame's flow changed, and it spewed out of Bufong's finger at an extremely fast speed. He controlled the temperature. He aimed the divine flame at the piece of meat in the black turtle constellation wok. As it approached, the flame spewed out, and the meat began to change color at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soul Overlord meat was a bit like cuttlefish meat, which solidified when heated. Bufong's control of the divine flame was somewhat similar to that of a flamethrower. Heating it at a fixed point made the flavor of the ingredients unique and concentrated. The black turtle constellation wok began to spin under Bufong's palm. The flamethrower aimed at the soul overlord meat. As the black turtle constellation wok spun, every position was considered. Layers of soul overlord meat began to solidify. An aroma wafted out. Bufong's face was filled with shock as he sniffed the aroma. It smelled so good. This soul overlord meat was simply a top-grade ingredient. Just smelling it made the energy in one's body boil. Bufong was somewhat intoxicated and even a little impatient, but he needed to calm his mind. After the fire was done, the soul overlord meat in the black turtle constellation wok had completely changed. It was roasted until it was golden and glistening with oil. The aroma rose. Bufong took out the meat and placed it on a blue and white porcelain plate. Bufong began to make the sauce. After the black turtle constellation wok was heated, he poured oil into it. The oil sizzled and splashed in the wok. He shook the wok so that the oil was evenly distributed in the wok. Then, Bufong poured all the prepared ingredients into the wok, stir-fried them, and added the secret abyssal chili sauce and some essence seasoning. He concocted a dark brown sauce. The sauce was thick and silky. Swish! He took a small bowl and poured the sauce into it. Bufong dipped his chopsticks in a little bit of the sauce and put it in his mouth. It tasted sour and spicy. The sour and spicy taste burst out on the tip of his tongue and spread across his tongue as if it wanted to rush into his scalp. It made his scalp go numb. He stacked the small bowl on the blue and white porcelain plate with the soul overlord meat. The dish was ready. Bufong walked out of the kitchen with the dragon blood rice and the roasted soul overlord meat. Everyone in the restaurant could not wait any longer. The aroma of the roasted soul overlord meat made everyone sink into it, unable to extricate themselves. The aroma seemed to be able to steal people's souls. Bufong did not expect that soul overlord meat would be so fragrant, especially when roasted by his own fire. The perfect heat made the soul overlord meat turn golden. The 100-layer soul overlord meat was stacked layer by layer, with the oil sliding down the middle. It was a beautiful sight. When the dish was served, Hades' era was stunned. He could not wait to grab the chopsticks and have a taste. However, you knocked it open with her chopsticks. You glanced indifferently at Hades' era, and the latter shuddered. How did Nethery become so scary? Have her wings hardened like Bufong's? Youngsters nowadays, Bufong handed the dragon blood rice to you. He grabbed the chopsticks, picked up a piece of soul overlord meat, dipped it in the sour and spicy sauce, and stuffed it into his mouth. The flavor of the sauce burst out instantly, followed by the taste of the meat. It was rich and chewy. As he chewed, he felt the elasticity of the meat knocking on the wall of his mouth. Bufong narrowed his eyes, immersed in the double impact of the meat and sauce. His guess was right. The soul overlord ingredient was indeed a top ingredient. After all, how bad could the quality of the meat be if it could become a soul overlord? Each piece of meat was cut very thin by Bufong, and when he picked it up, it seemed to reflect the light in the lamplight. Everyone ate happily. Having a delicious meal after a great battle made them feel as happy as immortals. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Bufong packed up his things. He walked out of the restaurant, leaned against the railing on the top of the building, and looked at the whole Shai divine dynasty. Everyone was immersed in the joy of victory. It was a kind of joy that came from persisting in a battle of life and death. This joy seemed to have infected Bufong. He exhaled and looked at the world. Suddenly, Bufong's heart skipped a beat. He had broken through to the god realm, and this time he did not get any more fragments of the god of cooking set. This meant that he had indeed collected all the god of cooking sets. However, there was an extra reward, the right to teleport to the sleeping place of the artifact spirit. This meant that if Bufong wanted to completely collect all the god of cooking sets, he still had to work hard. System, where's the sleeping place of the artifact's spirit? Can you tell me? Bufong asked the system, enjoying the comfortable morning breeze. The system was silent for a while. Then, it answered seriously, I can't tell you where the sleeping place of the artifact's spirit is, but I can remind you that teleporting there is a risk. A risk? It seems that place is not safe. Then where is it? Don't tell me it's going to the soul demon universe? Or is it the lair of the heaven god who slapped me? With that in mind, he asked the system. After a long time, guess, the system replied. Bufong was speechless. He could not believe that the system had become naughty. Chapter 1589. If truth be told, Bufong's curiosity was aroused by the system. Where was the sleeping place of the artifact's spirit? The almighty Qilin said it was a place he was familiar with, and the system was naughty enough not to tell him. Where could it be? A place where the artifact's spirit could sleep was definitely extraordinary. Bufong pondered for a long time, his heart filled with curiosity. However, Bufong did not think too much about it. Standing on the top floor of the skyscraper, he felt the morning breeze. A new day had begun. It was a day full of vigor and vitality. However, looking at the ruins of the city, Bufong did not open for business today. Both the Shy Crown Prince and the Titan Crown Prince had joined the army to hunt down the soul demons, and neither of them returned to the restaurant. After the great battle, Bufong was a little tired, so he decided to give himself a vacation. Therefore, he chose not to open for business today. Of course, he did not have anything else to do. He planned to pull up a chair and lie on the top floor of the skyscraper for a whole day. In the sky, one after another, the figures of experts descended from the sky. They were experts from various great worlds. They had formed teams to hunt down the soul demons, won, and returned triumphantly. It was a lively day. The whole Shy Divine dynasty seemed to have been reborn. People were laughing and cheering, thinking that it was a day of celebration. Bufong lay lazily on the chair for half a day. When he opened his eyes, it was already late at night. The day had passed just like that. In fact, sometimes he felt quite comfortable when he was idle. With a thought, Bufong entered the heaven and earth farmland. He had not been here for a long time. This time, he found that it seemed to have undergone earth-shattering changes. The surface area became incomparably vast, like a small planet. The layout of the lush grassland and the rushing river was no different from before. However, it was countless times larger than before. In a corner of the farmland stood a wooden hut. Bufong landed on the ground. Many people walked out of the wooden hut. Adi had become much fatter. The mutation of the heaven and earth farmland had brought Adi many benefits. This chicken had eaten until it was as big as a pig. He flapped his wings, but he couldn't even run. Bufong was speechless at the gluttonous chicken. Nyohan-san rubbed his hands and looked at Bufong. He naturally knew about the changes in the heaven and earth farmland. The changes here were closely related to Bufong. The heaven and earth farmland would only change when Bufong became stronger. This meant that Bufong's strength had become stronger again. This fellow was simply a monster. Voila! In the river of life, the fat blood lobster waved its pincer and waved it at Bufong. However, after Bufong gave it a look, the blood lobster shrank back into the river. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. The heaven tree was located in the center of the farmland, towering straight into the clouds. On the heaven tree, a senseless lotus was quietly blooming. Mu Hongzi had said that this senseless lotus could save his life at a critical moment, so Bufong had always been curious about it. He was very curious about the function of the senseless lotus. The 9-revolution Great Path tea tree was exuding vitality. The aroma of tea leaves wafted in the air as if there were camellias blooming on it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong walked in the farmland. He could feel the quiet changes that were taking place here. The concentration of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here was even higher than in the netherworld. It must be excellent to cultivate here. He chatted with Nyohan-san for a while. Then, Bufong left the farmland. Sitting in a wooden chair, Niu Hansen crossed his legs and watched Bufong leave. There seemed to be a faint light flashing in his eyes. Bufong returned to the restaurant. It was getting late. The army that had been chasing after the soul demons had returned. Without a doubt, they had won a great victory. Without the guidance of the soul overlords, the soul demons were all killed by the Shai Divine Emperor. This time, the people of the Shai Divine Dynasty showed no mercy. This kind of creature had nearly destroyed the entire chaotic universe. They didn't dare to let such a terrifying situation continue to happen. Therefore, they would not let any soul demon go. All the numbered soul demons were killed. The few remaining numbered soul demons were captured and imprisoned in the abyssal dungeon forever. The soul demon ancient beasts, on the other hand, were captured. They were huge and could not be captured by ordinary means, so the Shai Divine Emperor had arranged for them to be sealed in some planets. Bufong stood at the top of the skyscraper. One figure after another sped toward him. The Titan Crown Prince, his body rumbling with energy and blood, landed in front of Bufong with bloodshot eyes. He bowed respectfully to Bufong. The Shai Crown Prince, the Shai Divine Emperor, and the heads of the various aristocratic families also landed. Everyone looked at Bufong in awe. The Shai Divine Emperor had a complicated look in his eyes. He did not expect that Bufong would eventually become the existence who saved them from disaster. He had saved the Shai Divine Dynasty. He had saved the Shai Divine Dynasty from being destroyed like the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty and the Titan Divine Dynasty. This was a kind of happiness. In the following days, the Shai Divine Dynasty did not stop hunting down the soul demons, not sparing a single one. They began to search the small worlds one by one. As long as they found any signs of soul demons, they would kill them by force. The Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty and the Titan Divine Dynasty had also regained their status as divine dynasties. Although their divine emperors had fallen, their status still existed. Of course, compared to the Shai Divine Dynasty, their vitality was greatly damaged. The Titan Crown Prince returned to the Titan Divine Dynasty. He rebuilt the Divine Dynasty and began to cultivate talents from the remaining small worlds. The Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, on the other hand, was managed by Xiao Yinyu, and Amo Xiao Yinyu had broken through the Heaven Illuminator realm, and her current strength was extraordinary. At least, ordinary high-grade God Kings might not be her match. As the new Empress of the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, she had won the hearts of the masses. The whole chaotic universe began to resume its previous operation, and it was thriving. In the Shai Divine Dynasty, in the Luo family skyscraper, the top floor. No, not only the top floor, but from the top floor all the way to the bottom floor of the renovated skyscraper, there were long lines. Everyone was crowding around. The restaurant was bustling with activity. Luo Sanyang walked through the crowd, stepped onto the top floor, and followed the line into the restaurant. Inside, the restaurant was bustling with activity. Every diner's face was red from eating, and their lips were red and swollen, but their eyes were shining. There was a strange smell in the air. It was a little stinky and sour. In short, it was not a pleasant smell. Luo Sanyang's eyes widened, because she found that the stench was coming from the bowls in the hands of the diners in the restaurant. Damn it, it smells King good. It's so spicy and sour. It's so delicious that I almost swallowed my tongue. It's so delicious. This soup is so fresh, but it doesn't lack the sour taste. It's simply a delicacy in the world. The diners were full of praise. They ate crazily and took a deep breath, feeling so happy that bubbles were rising from their mouths. They were holding the snail rice noodles cooked by Bufong. Each of them had a bowl of it, and they were as happy as immortals. The people waiting in line outside, on the other hand, were so greedy that their mouths were almost watering. Only those who had tasted the snail rice noodles knew how delicious it was. It was an ecstatic delicacy. Ting-a-ling. The curtain of the kitchen door was lifted. Bufong walked out with 2 big bowls of snail rice noodles in his hands. The Shai Crown Prince took the bowls with familiarity and walked toward the dining table. Everything looked so orderly. "You're also helping." As for Hades' era, he was sitting in front of the table, chatting with Luo Sanyang's girlfriends. When they saw Luo Sanyang looking around, they waved happily. Bufang went into the kitchen. He shook off the water stains on his hands. Xiaopi, on the other hand, was lying on his shoulder, rolling her little eyes. Bufang took out the ingredients and began to cook again. Every day's business was actually repeating the complicated cooking work. However, it was this tedious, repetitive, and complicated work that made Bufang's cooking skills improve little by little. Bufang did not know what happened after the calamity of the soul demons. During this time, Bufang rarely had the time to calm down and cook. Every day, he cooked and opened a restaurant. When he was done, he cooked some delicious dishes for everyone to taste. Occasionally, the shy divine emperor would come to the restaurant to eat and drink, but Bufang did not mind. The days went by unhurriedly. The capital of the Shy divine dynasty had also regained its prosperity. In the sky, the stars were moving, the sky was flashing, and the rivers of stars were flowing backward. Bufang stood on the top of the skyscraper, looking up at the sky and relaxing his body and mind. Now, Bufang's cultivation base had reached the God Emperor realm. He was an existence that stood at the peak of this chaotic universe. However, because of this, Bufang had also fallen into a bottleneck. He wanted to become the god of cooking, and this was certainly not the end. Bufang still needed to move forward. Therefore, he had to break through the God Emperor realm and reach a higher realm. However, how to break through was a big problem for Bufang. He had broken through to the God realm by force and became a heaven illuminator. The normal way of breaking through to the heaven god realm naturally did not work for him. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. In addition, it was almost time to prepare for the awakening of the artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets. The location of the sleeping place of the artifact spirits, which had piqued Bufang's curiosity, was almost about to be revealed. But sure enough, while Bufang was deep in thought, the system's serious voice rang out in his head. "Attention, host. Do you want to use the qualification to go to the sleeping place of the artifact spirits?" The system asked. Bufang stared at the starry sky with a deep look in his eyes. At last, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Yes." He had to face what he had to face. If the god of cooking sets were incomplete, it would be very difficult for him to set foot on the true peak of the god of cooking. Therefore, he had to wake up the artifact spirits. After Bufang agreed, the system fell silent. No one knew how long it would take. The system's voice rang out again. Qualification confirmation completed. Attention, host. The teleportation to the sleeping place of the artifact spirits will begin in 6 hours. A friendly reminder. The sleeping place of the artifact spirits is very dangerous. Host, please be prepared. Oh, the teleportation will begin in 6 hours? So urgent. Bufang was slightly taken aback. However, 6 hours was enough for him to prepare things. In fact, he did not have anything to prepare. The sleeping place of the artifact spirits was very dangerous, so Bufang planned to go there himself. However, as soon as he turned around, Yu was standing behind him. The look in her eyes made Bufang's scalp go numb. There was no doubt that Yu knew where Bufang was going to teleport to, so she chose to follow him. Bufang could not refuse such a situation. Back in the restaurant, Bufang briefly explained the situation to the Shy Crown Prince and the Titan Crown Prince. After arranging the business, he began to prepare for the teleportation. The Lord Go continued to lie under the Path Understanding tree, sleeping soundly. Now, no one dared to disrespect the Lord Go, including the Shy Divine Emperor. After all, the Lord Go's true identity was that of a heaven god. How could they dare to offend him? Everything was ready. Bufang came to the top floor of the skyscraper in front of the restaurant. This time, the teleportation array was set up here. Clad in the vermilion robe, Bufang had Xiaopi and Little Hu on his back. You stood quietly beside him, waiting for the teleportation. Many people learned that Bufang was going on a long journey. They all came to see him off. Even the Xiaoyi divine emperor came from thousands of miles away. In the end, the whole divine dynasty was shaken. The Luo family skyscraper was surrounded by crowds of people. This showed Bu Fang's popularity. Looking at the many people of the divine dynasty, Bu Fang breathed a sigh of relief. The system's cold and serious voice rang in his ears. Around his body, white spots of light appeared little by little and finally turned into a mysterious array. This formation was many times more profound than the previous teleportation formation. Just a glance at it would make one feel as if their mind would sink into it. Buzz, as soon as the array appeared, it rotated slowly. Then, under the watchful eyes of tens of thousands, Bu Fang, little Huyu, Xiaopi's body, slowly they turned into specks of white light and quietly faded away. Bu Fang was in a trance. He felt that the people in front of him were getting more and more blurry, and even Yu, who was standing beside him, had become blurred. In the end, all that was left was endless darkness. No one knew how long it lasted. In that endless darkness, a ray of light appeared. Then, at the end of the darkness, a star appeared. It was a blue star. Chapter 1590. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. At the top of the Luo family skyscraper, Baiguang's figure was dazzling. Like a shooting star, he shot into the sky and disappeared. All that was left was the empty ground. Everyone looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. Bu Fang had left. He left just like that. No one knew how long Bu Fang would be gone. In the restaurant, Lord Go, who was lying on his stomach, slowly opened his eyes. There seemed to be chaos swirling in his eyes. After his last outburst, Lord Go's fat seemed to have evaporated a little. He stood up under the path standing tree, opened his mouth, and yawned. Then he strode out with his enchanting cat-like steps. "Hey, Lord Go, where are you going?" Hades Era, who was sitting in the restaurant, was bewildered. Lord Go gave Hades Era a sideways glance, then twitched his mouth. "I'm going to the place where I should go. There are some things that I need to get back," Lord Go said. Then his figure turned into a black shadow, rushing into the sky, creating a vortex in the void. It was as if he had entered the chaos and lost contact. Hades Era was a little bewildered. Bu Fang had left. Lord Go had also left, leaving him alone here. Bu Fang widened his eyes, looking at the blue planet in front of him. A familiar feeling washed over him, and Bu Fang's heartbeat involuntarily quickened. It was a strange feeling. A blue planet. Could it be it was getting closer and closer? That blue planet kept enlarging in Bu Fang's eyes. Soon, it went into the clouds. The clouds fell, and it was blurry. Continuing downwards, through the layers of clouds, was a vast expanse of land and sea. Earth, China, Bu Fang opened his eyes. What he saw was a ceiling painted with white mud. As Bu Fang stood up, the bed beneath him creaked continuously as if it was going to collapse at any moment. "Where is this?" Bu Fang raised his head and looked around. It was a simple room. There were not many furnishings in the room, and it looked rather shabby. The air was filled with a rotten smell. This smell made Bu Fang, who was used to smelling top-grade ingredients, frown. It was the sour smell of rotting ingredients. Looking over, the ground was messily piled with tattered vegetable leaves and chopped vegetables. From the cut on the vegetables, it could be seen that the person who cut the vegetables did not have good knife skills. Bu Fang didn't move. He frowned and fell into deep thought. During the teleportation, he saw a blue planet. That should be his destination. He should be on that blue planet right now. That familiar feeling. Could that blue planet be Earth? Bu Fang narrowed his eyes, feeling that it was somewhat impossible. How could Earth be related to the god of cooking sets? However, it was not impossible. Bu Fang narrowed his eyes again. It was the system that brought him to the hidden dragon continent, and the system was so closely related to the god of cooking sets. This meant that there were definitely secrets hidden on Earth. Or was Earth the birthplace of the god of cooking? Without thinking too much, what Bu Fang needed to do now was to get a better understanding of the environment he was in. but as his divine sense surged, Bufong suddenly froze. He found that the range of his divine sense could only extend to a radius of 10 meters. How is this possible? As a god emperor, once Bufong's divine sense was fully extended, it could even cover the whole Xiai divine dynasty. How could his mighty divine sense be suppressed to such an extent? Yes, it was suppressed. Bufong's cultivation base did not disappear. Instead, it was suppressed by a supreme force. It was as if a towering mountain was pressing down on his body, making him unable to move. The divine power in him seemed to be frozen. Although it could flow, it could not exert much power. Buzz Bufong's eyes lit up. He activated the divine power, the god of cooking's eye. His eyes shone brilliantly, as if he could see through the sky. When he looked up, he seemed to see a huge vortex over his head. Oh, interesting. Earth's great path? If it's the great path, it can't suppress me. Who is it? Bufong dispersed the god of cooking's eye. With his cultivation base suppressed, using the god of cooking's eye now placed a great burden on Bufong's divine sense. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they come. The system had said that the sleeping place of the artifact spirit was very dangerous, so he had to be more careful on this trip. Bufong got up from the bed. On the floor were his flip-flops. If nothing unexpected happened, Bufong was now back in his little shabby house before he transmigrated. At that time, he was still an apprentice chef in a restaurant. His face was expressionless as he held the flip-flops. With a thought, Bufong tried to summon the god of cooking sets. However, with a thought, he found that the god of cooking sets on his body still hadn't appeared. The god of cooking sets were floating in his spirit sea. What was going on? Even the god of cooking sets were suppressed? Then his idea of relying on the god of cooking sets to sense the artifact spirit wouldn't work. Bufong furrowed his brows. All of a sudden, Bufong was startled. Where are you, Xiaopi, and Little Hu? Where did they go? Without a doubt, they should also be on Earth. But where did they go? Bufong hurriedly opened his wardrobe, took out a white shirt, and wrapped it around his body. Then, he opened the door and hurried out. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a golden mantis shrimp curled up in front of the door. Xiaopi raised his head, looking at Bufong. With a sizzling sound, he turned into a golden light and landed on his shoulder. When Bufong saw Little Hu, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he patted Little Hu on the head. Where are you and Little Hu? Bufong asked. Xiaopi rolled his eyes and shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Bufong frowned and took a deep breath. A look of worry flashed across his face. He wasn't worried about the safety of you and Little Hu. Even though their cultivation bases were suppressed, no one on Earth could hurt you. You were a cursed goddess with a heaven god-level body. Even if a nuclear bomb bombed you, you would be unscathed. Even if you were suppressed, your physical resistance was still there. You couldn't use your earth-shattering cultivation base, but you still had some ordinary fighting prowess. In Bufong's opinion, ordinary fighting prowess would be at the level of a peerless expert on Earth. Bufong was worried about the crisis on Earth that the system had mentioned. If you and Little Hu accidentally got involved, it would be terrible. He walked out of the room and down the old building. Opposite the old building was the restaurant where Bufong had worked as an intern. At the entrance of the restaurant, a young man in a dirty chef's robe saw Bufong, and his eyes lit up instantly. Boy, hurry up and come here. What time is it? I called you, but you didn't answer. Are you going to be fired? You don't want to work anymore, do you? The young man had a cigarette in his mouth. When he saw Bufong, he scolded him loudly. The young man's name was Lu Mu. He had been an apprentice chef in the restaurant a little earlier than Bufong, so he called himself Bufong's senior brother. He liked to order Bufong, who was dull and only knew how to cook. Bufong glanced at Lu Mu expressionlessly, then reached into his pocket and took out his cell phone. It was an old Nokia cell phone. In the era of smartphones, it was considered an antique. Look, I called you a few times. Now that you've grown up, you've learned to be lazy. Lu Mu sneered. He held the cigarette between his index and middle fingers, then puffed out a smoke ring. Bufong glanced at Lu Mu, then grabbed the cell phone and pressed the button. Crack! Bufong didn't even use his strength. The phone was directly crushed, and electric arcs crackled a few times. Lu Mu was speechless. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. I just came back, so I'm still jet-lagged. Bu Fong said calmly, then casually threw the broken cell phone aside. I have something to do, so I have to go out, Bu Fong said calmly. Then, he turned around and walked away. Lu Mu's cigarette fell to the ground. When he came back to his senses, his embarrassment turned into anger. This stinky brat actually learned a bluff. Does he think he can show off by crushing a broken cell phone? Stop right there. Did I say you could leave? Lu Mu strode forward and caught up with him. He reached out his hand and patted on Bu Fong's shoulder, trying to pull Bu Fong away. He believed that Bu Fong was bluffing. Lu Mu, bully Bu Fong every day. So how could he not know this brat's character? You King, turn around. Lu Mu roared. However, he didn't manage to move Bu Fong even a little. It was as if he was pulling Bu Fong onto a boulder. Bu Fong stopped and glanced at Lu Mu. Lu Mu originally wanted to say something threatening, but when he met Bu Fong's eyes, his words got stuck in his throat. Bu Fong's eyes were like a bottomless abyss, making his scalp go numb. Damn, he's a different person, isn't he? That look is too scary. Lu Mu knelt on the spot. He felt his legs go weak, and with a thud, he knelt in front of Bu Fong. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. I'm sorry. I haven't adjusted to the time difference yet, so I startled you. The aura that Bu Fong had unintentionally released seemed to have frightened Lu Mu. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Xiaopi, who was on Bu Fong's shoulder, blinked and squeaked at Lu Mu. Lu Mu's lips trembled, and his body, which had gone limp on the ground, trembled. That's King mantis shrimp. In this world, there was a golden mantis shrimp? Help me apply for leave. Bu Fong didn't want to waste time talking to Lu Mu. He patted the other's hand. Crack! Lu Mu's eyes widened, and he let out a miserable howl. Bu Fong patted his hand. Lu Mu felt as if his hand was caught in a door. Lu Mu trembled all over, looking in horror at Bu Fong, who was walking away in his flip-flops and shirt. This Bu Fong was not the Bu Fong he knew. This guy is a ghost. Recently, the TV news has been reporting that there are more people with extraordinary abilities and that there are more and more paranormal incidents. Is it all true? Bu Fong is not possessed by a ghost, is he? Lu Mu was so frightened that he could not stop trembling. Bu Fong left. He planned to look around for you and Little Hu. Although he had returned to Earth, he had no time to reminisce about everything. The most important thing now was to find the sleeping spirit of the god of cooking Set. The most important thing now was to find you. He wasn't afraid that others would cause trouble for you, but he was afraid that you would cause trouble. If that happened, it would shock the whole world. However, because Bu Fong's divine sense was suppressed, he couldn't spread it out to search. After searching for a long time, he found nothing. Swish, walking on the street, it suddenly rained. Drip, drip, drip. Bean-sized raindrops fell on him, slightly surprising Bu Fong. Because it was raining, pedestrians hurried away to avoid the heavy rain. Bu Fong, on the other hand, stood alone in the rain. Xiaopi jumped happily on Bu Fong's shoulder, moving its dense legs. It seemed to be very happy with the rain. Bu Fong reached out his hand, and a drop of rain fell from his palm with a splat. Looking at the raindrop, Bu Fong raised his eyebrows slightly. Because within the raindrops, there was spirit chi spreading out. It was a spiritual energy rain. Bu Fong was stunned. Spiritual energy rain? Was this still Earth? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.